Gotcha.
All right, Simon Michaux, welcome to our first Accidental Gods podcast of 2024. And thank you for wearing your Superman t-shirt. We can't quite see it. Bring
Oh,
yourself
yeah,
up. There
yeah.
we go. Superman.
There we go.
Superman for 2024. Thank you.
Hello, Amanda.
Because you are the person who, as far as I'm concerned, has the greatest insight and the greatest breadth of understanding. So kick us off, Simon. What
So,
could happen in 2024? What should happen in 2024? And what do you think is actually likely to happen? Any of those. You can answer in any order, in any depth, for as long as you like. Over to
so
you.
I'm wearing my Superman shirt today because there was a management meeting and I wanted to come formally dressed. Um,
What does informal look like then? That's the low-key t-shirt.
I do have a number of T-shirts, and they're all for different people. Like the pirate one, I actually sort of run when I'm running a research consortium meeting, and says, we be
Yes.
pirates. But
Yes.
when I wear this one, it's Superman cannot be stopped. And so when I get told what I can and can't do, I go, that's nice.
Yes. Let me put the bat signal on the wall and post you some kryptonite. Alrighty, so what's the kryptonite? What's
So,
happening?
okay, so we are in the phase of, we're a couple of years in to a very interesting time period. Now, if you remember one of our old podcasts, previous podcasts, I showed you a slide of like metal price that all blew out in 2005.
Yep.
Right, that's actually when I actually sort of have the start of this era. If you read the book The Fourth Turning, they've got the fourth turning in the current that's starting in 2008 to 2030. I've got the time starting in 2005, because that blowout then later created the GFC, global financial
Yep.
crisis.
Okay.
Right. So we're a couple of years in, and the last couple of years in particular, one damn thing after another has been going wrong. Now,
Yeah.
as a general rule of thumb, all the normal methods of operation are one by one failing. It's like no one knows what to do.
No.
And
But the
one,
bad guys are clinging on quite tight. It does look like Trump's going to get in. The Tories are not going to. I have a
so
contact in the Tory party who says they are not going to stand down because they have to finish off the NHS before they leave. And he actually said that. So they are gripping with their little fingernails as they slide down the cliff.
guillotine is coming out again. So yes, the bad guys are hanging on by the skin of their teeth. They're really hanging on, but it's not going well for them on
No, that's
multiple
true.
fronts. It's their plans are just coming apart at the seams, right?
Because they don't acknowledge geophysical reality, do you think? Because they seem not to.
Um, I think they're used to dictating terms of geophysical reality,
Right.
right? But
Ideology
it
wins.
has evolved. I believe like humans are as like an individual consciousness, but also a group consciousness.
Right. What Nate would call the superorganism.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but he calls a superorganism for not only humans but also the system that we are embedded in and the environment it's embedded in. Like it is like one gigantic system, and
Okay.
the super amoeba is the industrial system that just eats everything in its path. And I'm talking about humanity itself. Where have you noticed, for example, that certain ideas can be talked about openly now that were considered taboo even 2 or 3 years ago?
Like,
Oh, what, peak oil?
okay. All right. Was
That
that a
was
taboo?
considered
I mean,
that
not
was
in
that was
my circles,
that
but
was
then I,
considered a conspiracy theory that you had to be seriously unbalanced to consider in the industrial
but it's
world.
obvious.
When I was talking about in 2010 and 2005, 20 that era. Oh, no, that'll never happen. Shut your pie hole. And
Okay, but I did listen to you and Chris Martenson, and he is quite accurate.
yeah,
It's it is going
so,
to run out. The scale
yeah,
might, you could
yeah.
argue about the scale, but you can't suggest that oil is infinite.
Yeah, but the people you could actually sort of talk about, oh, we have plenty of oil left. Come
Oh,
on,
I
that's
see.
not
Okay,
going to
so
happen.
it'll last us for another
Right,
100 years, and then we
right.
don't
So
care.
the perception of people you would talk to, you couldn't bring that up in polite conversation. Right, there's a whole series of these topics.
Okay.
The other one is like a digital currency. That was considered a conspiracy theory.
The central bank digital currency or any digital currency?
In all of the above, but
Okay.
a central bank global currency that is digital in nature.
Okay.
That was, or the other one, for example, was a digital passport that had all your information on it, which will be linked to a social credit system.
Right.
Right. That was proposed many years ago.
Okay.
Right. And so now it's there. And so now you're in the supermarket and random people can talk to you. My point is humanity as a group, as like if all humans are connected together, so if you see it as like one organism, we are evolving in sophistication, which means the usual horse shit is not working.
Okay.
Now, the people in charge of things at the moment, when people play a rigged game, they tend to get stupid and they're complacent and they
Okay.
make mistakes. That's what's happening. And so geophysical reality, is there, but there was a time when they could, the people in control of things could do what they want, and we just had to go along with it.
Yeah. Okay. For
Way
quite a
in.
long time, actually,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
in within our relative speaking. I mean, not, obviously
Yes.
not 300,000 years, but within the last century.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, the people at the top made the decisions. Everybody else got the choice to go along with it or end up in prison or dead.
So, yeah. And so what's happening is every human relationship is based with four principles, at least for me: love, trust, respect, and honor. Now, at all levels, in all interactions, in all institutions, everything human and anything that has a relationship that has emotions with anything else, for example, your pet cat, it'll have the same thing. So what I mean there is, when people from, say, 50 years ago heard their leader speak, like, say, their prime minister speak, they trusted, respected, and honored that person, and at some level even liked them, on the spectrum of affection somehow. How much of that is eroded now? Trust in particular, respect in
Respect,
particular.
gone. Yes.
Right. And so the public at large is starting to see through the veil.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
And
Emperor's
so
clothes are now considered not to be there.
not only not there, they were never there.
Yep.
It's not like the emperor has suddenly misplaced his clothes. No, he never had them.
Right. Yeah, okay.
And neither did the previous emperor. So,
Yeah.
so anyway, so what's happening to us now is this long process that is years and in some cases decades long. We are starting to come together and we're starting to see things now. And when we are told certain things, we don't necessarily go along with it and behave as programmed. So as programmed is humanity, I believe, for some time now, or at least group parts of us have been programmed with forms of, you might call it propaganda, but I think that term is not sophisticated enough. It's like we have been influenced with fairly sophisticated levels of suggestion of what to think, when to think, how to think. Remember in 1984, the 2 minutes of hate. I remember when I first read that as a kid, I'm going, yeah, come on, that's a bit silly.
No,
I'm
and
watching
it
it.
happens all around us. Yes. And it's within very narrow behavioral and conceptual lines, it seems to me. I mean, the death cult is keeping us arguing about tiny, tiny fractions of cultural wars that are completely irrelevant in the overall collapse of the ecosphere.
That's the point, keeping us occupied. But if you read, there are now several different issues on the books now where they're doing that, but the methods of doing that and even the words they're using are the same. So the patterns and cycles within each of those issues are the same, and they are diagnosing the actual hidden methods behind them.
Okay. I
Right.
mean, they're very, very good at neurophysiology and neuropsychology,
But
basically.
so are we. But at an instinctive level, our instincts are telling us, no, mate, no, come on, none of that.
Okay. Bullshit meters win out.
So not only are the bullshit meters actually sort of pinging and the flags are going up as if that's not true, the people we are now programmed to hate, we are now looking at them in terms of collaboration and realizing they're just like us.
Okay.
Now, at a fundamental level, let's call them the death cult, what they are most afraid of is unconditional love.
Okay.
If you actually look at, when a detective goes through your garbage and they're looking at so what have you thrown away, they're trying to actually show, for example, unpack like who you are, what you are, and what you're doing. Look at the actions, the Muppets of Cutthroat Island. What are they doing? And if they're doing this, and this, what are they truly about?
Okay.
They are afraid of unconditional love.
Right. Because it's not part of their narrative. It's not really part of their reality, as far as I can
No.
tell. I know I shouldn't be theming other, shouldn't be creating an us and them, but there does seem to be an overclass for whom business as usual
Yeah.
is the only option. And they are at the top of that very steep-sided
Hmm.
pyramid, and they will do whatever it takes to keep it moving down the line.
Well, yeah. And they're having to get more and more extreme actions to get less and less results
Yeah.
because we are evolving. And so there's a race. Can the Muppets of Cutthroat Island get what they want to get over the line in time? And can humanity awaken fast enough to
Right.
see what's actually happening? And it's a race. And as far as I can tell, we've already won. It's
Oh,
just a
really?
question of how much damage is actually going to happen.
Damage because the people at the top will just throw tantrums, throw all their toys out of the pram and throw a few nukes because they can, or damage because it's already built into the system.
Both.
Mm,
Both.
okay.
The decisive action is, do they actually throw their nukes or
Mm.
not? Everything else, humanity at large is sort of, enough of us are waking up, and that awakening is hardening up and developing as an undercurrent.
How do you see that awakening? Because meet general people in the supermarket or whatever. Not that I go to the supermarket, but anyway, I meet general people
Yeah.
when I do, and they still seem to be worried in the UK about small boats. Who gives, really, honestly? Or they're worried about the things that happen here. And if I talk about climate change,
Yep.
climate emergency, I wrote to someone who I considered to be super, really quite bright and quite switched on the other day and said, bloody blah, something, given the nature of the meta crisis, this. And I got an email back by return going, what's a meta crisis? I'm like,
So
pardon?
small boats. What about large boats that are painted grey?
Like the battleships, you mean?
So
It-
I'm seeing, like, when I used to live in a place called Mount Tamborine in Australia, and that was what I didn't realise at the time, but there was a high proportion of people who were very much awake. The rest of the world used to see them as hippies, but we would have random conversations in the supermarket with people I've never seen before about the strangest topics, and
Wow.
it really sort of, and so what you're referring to there, I think, is there's two levels of human interaction. One is the day-to-day talking, hi, how you doing? And people are still sort of comfortable at that level. But the number of people online
Okay.
in the internet who actually are discussing this, because the internet apparently is more private, if you will. You can actually express yourself, or you can look at things without the judgment of the person standing next to you.
Okay.
But they don't say certain things out loud. Like, I heard an interesting statistic: 40% of Generation Z have actually gone out and spent money on things like food supplies and equipment in case things get more difficult. Right?
Wow.
They're preppers.
The preppers on some scale.
40%.
Okay. Okay. So they're aware. They are really aware.
A lot of them are.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of them are. And so you have these different layers of reality that we're dealing with.
Hmm.
And when you meet people in the supermarket, this is sort of like, oh no, I don't believe in any of that stuff. You'd have to wrap not wrap too tight to actually consider that seriously.
Hmm.
Right. But then they'll go home and look on the internet and, no one's seeing me now. Oh,
Okay.
UFOs,
Right.
aliens.
Oh,
Yeah.
let's not go to the aliens. Yeah. Okay.
So anyway, so um, we are in the process of what I call awakening. The veil is lifting.
Okay.
So many things are going wrong on multiple fronts. The finance stuff in particular, some really, really, really scary information's coming in, but it's been happening so long now that when we're seeing this sort of stuff, it is, all right, I understand exactly what it is, but I no longer have an emotional reaction to it. Right? The
Okay.
data in every sector in the world, when you look at the fundamentals, China, the United States, Europe, we're all in deeper shit than usual.
Even China, because
Oh,
listening to you and other recent podcasts, I'll do that one again. Listening to you and other recent podcasts, it seemed that China was playing the long game. They're playing Go, where we're still basically playing cricket,
mhm.
and that they had a pretty good plan. Although it did seem to me that any plan is going to fall over if we hit 10 degrees C, which is not impossible.
Both
But
are true.
are they in trouble just because they're no longer the kind of repository of all the world's national debt?
No, I think what's happening is all large players, or in fact, everyone understands that an economic correction is coming, which will mark the end of the fiat currency experiment. All fiat currencies will crash and reset, and we will have a devastating economic period, right? And everyone understands that.
Okay.
And so once they understand that it cannot be avoided, it cannot be postponed, now they can say, can we control it?
Can we have a soft landing, basically?
Or rather, can we manifest a new system on the other side of that, where humanity has a hard landing, but they have a soft landing? And coming out the other side, whatever the proposed system is on the other side of it, and there's a few now, the hierarchy of who owns what, who controls what. And so I believe the Chinese and the Americans in particular are playing that game and are jockeying for position, knowing that their systems, as they are about to be destroyed, but while they're being destroyed, from the ashes, a new system will be manifested, but it will not be a very nice system for humanity at large to deal with because of what is being dealt with. They know that, they understand that. And so, yes, there is some very serious information coming out of China saying the existing way of doing things is coming apart at the seams. So it is now time to actually press the red button, everything blows up, and then the new system comes out the other side. Humanity is just going to be put in an appalling situation. We'll have no choice but to go along with it.
Okay, I have some quick questions. 3 linked questions. 1, will the Chinese look after their own population first as a priority? 2, are they likely to just press a red currency button? Because they could tomorrow crash the world's currency if they tried. It wouldn't take very much. Are they likely to preemptively create this, or are they just waiting till everything falls off a cliff because the debt to GDP ratio is just too high?
So the Chinese system will look after the Han dynasty first.
Okay.
Right, so the Han, they're the ruling class within China. It's like the Saudi royal family in Saudi Arabia. The Han dynasty goes first. As a distant second, the rest of China population, and an even more distant third is the rest of the population on planet Earth. Right, so this
is this a deliberate depopulation exercise? Because I listened to someone on Nate's podcast the other day, and he said, "What could we do that would make a big difference?" He said, and the guy said, "Cut the population to 1 billion tomorrow."
And there is a group of people who actually believe that is the actual answer. They saw the Club of Rome report, Limits Growth report in the early 70s, just like everyone else. And they go, well, what do we do about this?
But well, I remember you and I having a conversation in the middle of last year, and me going, if I were one of the masters of the universe, I would be wiping people out, because I think far fewer people's got to be, from one perspective, an answer, and yet we're all still alive. If that's their plan, they're not really very good at implementing it. Unless
it depends, and it depends, because remember, they've got to maintain their own power structures.
Okay.
Right. So what I do, there are several schools of thought here. The depopulation agenda now has 3 streams running in parallel, and depending on which stream you subscribe to, you tend to refuse the existence of the other 2.
Oh, great. Okay.
And one of them is we are in the process of a depopulation event happening at the moment, where all the long-term serious problems in human health are accelerating. Things like myocarditis, obesity, liver
endocrine
fat,
disruptors, stopping fertility, which is
all of that.
quite high.
So humanity is undergoing a health problem where we've got all the deep cycle long-term health problems are now exploding. Cancer, incidence of cancer going through the roof. And so roll the clock forward in 10, 20 years' time. What are the implications of all that?
Okay.
And so if that has been implemented in a way where we have no idea what's actually happening, right, and just life goes on, and then you get the outcome. Whereas if they line everyone up, put you up against a wall, and you pull the trigger,
at some point somebody notices. Yeah.
But everyone goes, aha, that's what's happening, and then we get organized and we take them out because there's more of us than them.
Yep.
Right. So you have to, it helps if you say, how would a psychopath solve a problem like this?
And then watch what's happening.
Yeah.
But so I have another question, because it seems to me that one of the ways that they're doing this is they're now PFAS, polyperfluorated alkylated substances in the rain, forever chemicals in the rain, and they are definitely endocrine disruptors, and they have just been demonstrated to be carcinogenic, in spite of an entire industry that works quite hard to make sure that you cannot publish anything that demonstrates them to be carcinogenic. The land is George Monbiot. I'm not terribly fond of a lot of the stuff that he does now, but he published something in The Guardian early December showing that certainly in the UK, the water companies are now allowed to put sewage sludge on the land. Technically, they are fertilizing the land, and it's fine until you want to build houses, but you're not allowed to build houses there because it's too toxic, because your kids would play in the garden and they would die, but you can grow food on it. So the endocrine disruptors in the water and the food and in the entirety of the food chain are huge. And so reproductive rates are massively falling, amongst other things, and cancer rates and chronic diseases from a number of things. But it's a hell of a blunt instrument, because how do you turn that around?
You don't.
But how do you survive then if you're one of the masters of the universe who's a psychopath who thinks this is a fun thing to do? Because you have just, the entire ecosphere is now falling apart because you've laden the atmosphere with toxins.
So you might notice that the very, very rich don't live next to you or I. They live in communities very, very far away, and they have the best.
It still rains. They still get the rain.
That's true, but they also think in terms of, say, 100 years from now, if they have like a hard stop of certain things, the planetary life systems can recover in a relatively short period of time.
They reckon.
And so, but if they have a hard stop, thing is, we keep doing it each year with more and more.
Yeah.
So when I was in Hong Kong recently, I was at a venture capital.
Name drop, clang, talking to the Chinese government.
Yeah, well, I was talking to like a venture capitalist group, and it was run by the Chinese government, and I got a feel for who they were, and they're outside the West, and they're looking at the West saying, you guys are doing this to yourselves. And says, we're going to let you, and the mentality was, they know what the West is doing. The strategies the West are rolling out, those strategies have been neutralized, apparently, at least on the world stage, not necessarily internally, but the West's attempt to try and sort of conquer other parts of the planet.
Okay.
And it says, under the weight of your own short-sightedness, we're going to watch you burn, and we're not going to lift a finger to help. And so they're actually sort of got like a multiple strategy approach where they're trying 20 different ideas, they're funding them all, they're treating them all seriously, and those ideas are cross-fertilizing with each other within the Chinese mindset, and they're seeing which one will help us the best.
Okay, which is very sensible.
That's not what we are doing. That's what they are doing.
Yeah, okay.
We, on the other hand, are putting a hat on one or two strategies we know won't work, right, in the name of control.
And those strategies are?
Well, we are, I believe, for example, the strategies of the Great Reset put out by the World Economic Forum, where they want to round everyone up and put them into highly dense cities, put them under like a lot of surveillance, a lot of control, and control their behavior. Right, it's all control, because it's not for everyone.
And feed them precision fermented proteins.
Right. So
like rewild everything else.
Like if you take an airplane, if you or I take a flight somewhere, you've got to go through airport security, have your suitcase x-rayed, you have got to put everything, empty your pockets, take off certain clothing, take off your shoes, take off your belt, and it's quite invasive. If you happen to be traveling with, say, a billionaire that owned a private jet,
you just get on.
They just get on. The car drives right up the jet. The car's not searched. Suitcases are loaded on. The suitcases are not x-rayed. They show their passport. That's it. At both ends. Right.
Sorry,
so this is the West. And it's all about control of us. Right.
It's a very high energy control. I mean, you cannot, nobody sane thinks that we're going to be able to continue that with the energy ramp down that's coming.
So what you've touched on there is one of the signatures, which means it's a short-term thing. There's a number of them. for example, I think we discussed this in one of our previous discussions, that the green transition that we talk about, when you actually sort of pin the politician to the floor by their lower lip and demand, what have you actually done?
Mm.
The answer is nothing. But we've legally committed to certain things by 2030.
Oh, yes, but our government in the UK has demonstrated you just go, oh, did we legally commit to that? Well, we just uncommit. Sorry, guys. Doesn't matter anymore.
No, but so hang on, that's not going to wash for much longer, because we've now, like Finland, for example, is committed to climate net zero by 2035.
Yeah, but it's net. It's just an accounting fiddle.
So,
They'll just
but
tweak the
when it
numbers.
comes time to actually sort of look at the post-fossil fuel systems, we're one voting cycle away from the voting public understanding that not only nothing has been done, but they never intended to do anything, and it was all a way of leading us around by the nose and convincing us there was a plan and for us to keep quiet. It's like we're being collectively marched to the edge of the pier and the veil lifts and there's, oh, sorry, there's no plan. Yeah, that was Trevor. He did those numbers.
He's not here anymore.
Sorry about that. Now we've got to engage in some hard decisions. And
I have a question with that though. One voting cycle away, certainly in the UK, it looks to me in the US, the people who are making those non-decisions are also the people who control the media. And the media is very, very good at telling people, look over there, small boats. Don't just ignore, 2030. Oh, it's nonsense. Climate alarmists is a phrase. And I can imagine several voting cycles where people are required to look elsewhere because, hey, this stuff's too complicated. Do you think that the population as a whole will wake up to...
Yes.
Why? How? What's going to help them when the media that they are bombarded with is about to be taken over, as far as I can tell, by AI, and it will be impossible to know? I mean, you and I could each generate videos of the other saying something completely other than we've just done. Within a year, that's going to be there.
No doubt. In fact, it might already be here. So when the Soviet Union fell, just before it did, they had the news on at 6:30 every night. I think it was something like that. And it was the state-run media. And it got increasingly ridiculous, right? As if you had to watch it. So people said, well, if I'm not home, I don't have to watch it. So everyone left at 6:30 to walk the dog, or just walk around the block, and so all at once, everyone left their homes.
And they're on the street talking to each other.
And they've got nothing else to do but talk to each other. And then very quickly, ideas started to exchange. Right. And so saying is all the conventional ways of us doing things were being pushed in a particular direction. And I think humanity will evolve around that and start to depend on different things.
Okay, I hope so.
Right. And just because a talking head tells me to believe something, if I'm thinking that could be an AI, that's not necessarily real, which means I don't have to just take it for granted that what that talking head is saying is real.
But my confirmation bias, if I've understood my neurophys at all, is that if the talking head says something I already inherently believe, I will want to believe it. At the time when I will decide it isn't talking sense is when it says something that I don't want to believe, and then, oh, that's just the AI, I don't care. Confirmation bias seems to be quite a big feature of the race to the bottom of the brainstem that we get in social media and everything else. And it amplifies quite fast, so you end up with the tribal stuff on either side. That's really easy for people who want to spark tribal divisions to do that.
Okay, so what happens if we start talking about an issue that's not directly what we're looking at, but say a related issue that we don't really have an opinion about, but it is important, right? And then we talked about something by those same talking heads that's obviously bullshit.
Okay.
Right, and so hang on a sec, that doesn't fit.
Right.
And you're outside the tribal boundaries of what you normally like to argue about. But the system can fracture on a related issue.
Okay.
And that has implications.
Yes,
Hang on a second. If what that talking head just said is not true and they're not real, and the same tone, and it's a tone of voice, I'm now hearing other things as well, and that's not matching up with the reality that I see out the window.
Okay, so cognitive dissonance comes in, and somewhere in the gap of that schism, somebody can wake up, and then they need to have sources they can trust to gain a more accurate sense.
and it all starts again. And we're moving into an era where each of us have got to fall on our internal reserves of what's real and not real, intuition and discernment, and who
Connection
do
to
we
the web of
trust?
life. Go out and sit on the hill and see what happens, because that's real. Yes.
Because
Okay.
a lot of it, a lot of what's coming through the media is fear, fear, fear.
Yeah.
Fear is your god. Kneel and pray.
Yeah, and let me expand your amygdala a little bit more. Apologies to the neuroscientists out there. I realize it's not an identical organ, but let me just get your entire system more uprated and upregulated, so it's really hard for you to come back down into some kind of parasympathetic balance.
Right. So instinctively, the part that sits under our conscious mind is evolving to the point where it become more prominent. And the conscious mind is of, well, I've been told to fear will I get my next paycheck? For the last 10 years, I've been fearing, and it never changes. Right. So what am I really afraid of? What's really happening behind all this? Right. So this is what I call the awakening.
Okay.
And we have many, many, many different issues, all of which are scary, but are actually linked in a system. And the awakening is when we all understand what the hell we're looking at. Now, we don't have to agree, but the awakening is when we have discussion, where everyone is discussing things and getting their arms around these issues and can have an intelligent discussion respectfully on these issues. And you don't have to agree on the outcome or even what the issues actually are. But the humanity at large is starting to educate itself as opposed to signing over its sovereignty by allowing someone else to do our thinking for us.
Okay.
Right.
And do you think the awakening will happen in this coming year, that 2024 is kind of
in progress
waking
now?
up year? Okay.
I'm seeing things for the last 5 or 6 years, and each passing year is more encouraging than the last. Right. So we are seeing increasingly desperate things to try and keep everyone in their place using their credit cards, trust us, we've got it under control. Right. I'm seeing greater discernment, and now I'm starting to see, and in fact, I'm in this place, a solution space. We're moving out of this is the problem, and into this is what we might do about it. Now, all the conventional discussions about what we might do about it, okay, the first generation of them are impractical. They're a nice idea, but really they're a bridge to something else.
Okay.
Right, we're going through that process where we're now churning through the different solutions and thinking about the practicalities of it. And what's apparent is when you put your hat on a particular solution, you're joining a tribe. And you will
Right. So you're
offend your
the electric
tribe.
vehicle tribe, or
bitter end. Yes.
yeah.
And so we are seeing a series of them going through, and there are things we have forgotten or are not included. Like we don't think about the oxygen we breathe, right? But it's there and we need it.
Some of us do.
Right. Well, some of us do, yeah. So, but there is a lot of things in our world that we take for granted. And like you talk to the average person, for example, and so do you expect clean running water to come out of the tap when you turn the tap on? Of course you do. What a daft thing to suggest. But talk to anyone who, say, lived through World War II or lives in parts of Africa. That is not.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyways, there's a whole lot of things that we've got to sort of uncover in our blind spots. And do the tribes stay tribes? And so we've got to have a look at the idea that we can test an idea, discuss an idea, like an idea, but then put the idea down for something else without having these bitter confrontations where winner takes all, loser loses everything discussions like to see. And so we've got to problem solve. And so this is called the awakening. It's been in progress. I think 2024 will be an extraordinarily significant year on a number of respects. The veil is just going to be ripped right off our eyes in many respects, and that'll set off a chain reaction. And then humanity, in spite of the barriers in front of it, will start to awaken, and not just in ones and twos, but large numbers. And we don't have to agree, and we might even have groups that disagree with each other, but at least we can now start discussing stuff which at the moment is taboo. Okay. And a lot of our beliefs of how the world works and what the world is and where things come from are simply not valid.
Yeah.
And that's going to come. And so this next part, and that's also starting to happen now, is what I call the ascension. Now, well, these are there are RPG role-playing games called Mage the Awakening, Mage the Ascension. That's where the
Yes.
names
Okay,
come from.
got you. Yep.
Right, but the ascension, the awakening is like we all wake up. But once we all wake up, we all look at each other and go, well, now what?
Right.
And to quote Jacques Fresco, this shit's got to go.
Jack Fresco of the Venus
Oh, the
Project.
Venus Project. Yeah, I'll
Yay.
come to him later.
Okay.
But the ascension is, what do we do about it?
Okay.
It's all right, we're in trouble, we're in a mess, but we're not helpless. We've got a brain, and we've got each other, and we've got our education. Now what?
Okay.
And so we've now got to build a new world. Oh, okay. And I'll have the rest of the day off and a nice lie down.
With
So,
dwindling resources, and we've got to be very careful what our power sources or our new world can forget itself because 10
and
degrees.
resources and manage and interaction with the environment, relationship with the environment, interacting with each other. You know, all human relationships, love, trust, respect, and honor. We've got to restore that.
Mm. And we've got to
And so,
restore it across international boundaries because at the moment we have the Chinese behind an effective paywall with a group of people who sound like they actually get it and they're doing some quite intelligent things. But if what you said is true, that they're basically going to stay behind their paywall and just watch everybody else
they've got
crash
their
and
own problem.
burn.
They've got their own problems.
Okay, and we want
Yeah.
to connect so that we're all problem solving together because there's some seriously bright people.
But you know the idea of the holographic principle, where what happens on a small scale
Like a
also
fractal,
happens on a large
yes,
scale.
yes.
Yeah, right.
Niels Bohr.
So yeah. So here's the idea: we first look after ourselves. We change how we see things and how we see ourselves and how we see everything around us. And then we change how we see each other. And on a small scale, we change how we do things. And then that becomes larger and larger and becomes stable, right? And in a 100th monkey kind of way, lots of people are starting to do it,
Yeah.
right? And then we start interacting with other people around the world. As the old ways of doing things start to become harder and harder to maintain, the people in those older systems will look at people in the newer ways of doing things, and they'll see some things crash and fall, but they'll see some things do really well.
Mm.
So, oh wow, yeah, that's really cool. Why don't we try that?
Okay, so what are some of the really cool things that you're seeing emerging in this new fertile ground?
So there's a lot of them. So the what I call there's two fundamental paths going forward. One, we've got to have discussion of all these issues and how they fit together. And the best
Which is
way
what we're
I've seen
doing
so
here.
far is what we're doing here. This podcast, but also ones like it, are getting people to think, and in a form where this podcast can be handed on to someone else. And the listeners don't have to agree with what I'm saying, but if they start thinking for themselves, then it's been successful.
Yep.
All right. That's one frontier. The other frontier is we've got to take all these really, really unusual ideas, innovative ideas, and turn them into something useful.
Okay.
Take an idea and turn it into an engineering outcome, a physical thing, and then see how those physical things come together. So we're talking about innovation hubs, innovation groups. Let's see if we can work things out, try new things. And the things that work, tell everyone. The things that don't work, tell everyone. Right? And so we are collectively, it's going to be like the wild, wild west in ideas.
Without the genocide of the native people, hey?
So no, that those native people are going to be required to help us if they've got the patience to do it and the grace, because we behaved appallingly to them. So, but you know, for example, the native indigenous population of Australia, the Aborigines, were a stable culture for thousands of years.
Yeah, hundreds of thousands of years.
So we've got to go and learn from them with a stable relationship with the environment.
Yep.
How do you do that?
And they were managing the environment. It just didn't look like farms to cook when he landed. Yes.
So I knew this Aborigine guy in Australia, and his name's Willie. He's an old guy. And he had this phrase that I used. I used to work in Emerald, in a town called Emerald in Queensland, around the coal mines. And then he was just, one of the guys that, filled up petrol at the station and I'd meet him at the bar. He had this great phrase: white man still doesn't know what he doesn't know, but pain is a great teacher.
Whoa. And this is before Rumsfeld and his unknown unknowns.
Oh, yeah, this is what, 1996?
Right. Right.
Anyway, so
Yeah. And
right.
we still don't know what we don't know. That's, that
And
absolutely
that may well be
fundamental.
for some time, but if we start the purpose of learning in the right direction, and getting out of our own way, we
Okay.
might actually, and start interacting with parts of our own mind that we have since written off. And that is in the fractal thing. We start interacting with solutions around us that we had previously written off, but are actually not necessarily, that's not necessarily appropriate. So,
What sort of things?
well, can we get to that in a moment?
Sure.
What I
Yeah.
call the new energy paradigm.
Okay.
So what I call the Ascension is a whole series of working groups that look at ideas of all kinds. It's like the old Academy of the Rose Croix, where it doesn't matter what you're looking at.
Sorry about the thing. Okay.
It's in the Age of Enlightenment, back in the 16th century, there was a group called the Rosicrucians, and they had the idea of the Invisible Academy to try lots of different ideas. And
And this was
actually,
under the auspices of the Catholic Church, presumably, or was it hidden? Was this
people were
behind the scenes?
burned at the stake for saying such things.
Okay.
But this was just as the age of reason was kicking off. And the age of reason was a natural evolution of the human group consciousness, because like, we're not doing this anymore. Go back and look at some of the writings of the 15th century, and we were in a terrible state. Like the superstition in the writings was, and the inconsistencies, and there's a reason aliens don't talk to us. And so we had to actually evolve to a point where we had to actually clean up our thinking and have it more structured.
Okay.
We're about to go through another phase like that again, I believe, when we're actually being pushed to almost at death's door, and we don't have the luxury anymore to be complacent. Why do we have to think for ourselves? Why do I have to be nice to the person next to me? Why do I have to have a genuine relationship with the environment, both short-term and long-term? And so on.
Okay.
And so as an individual and in groups of all sizes. And the consequence, reason, consequence, and accountability is coming. Right. So yes, so we're going to have an innovation suite, not from one person or one point, but as many people as we can manage all over the world are going to step up and try new ideas as things fall apart around them.
How are they funding this, Simon? Because this is, I taught a class last night and we were discussing a lot of this. And somebody said, I work a 60-hour week within the death cult. I hate it, but I can't afford not to. And I'm imagining that if we could free people up from their 60-hour weeks, the creativity that would be freed up is extraordinary. But in the meantime, they starve. Or they end up on the streets, hoping that Taylor Swift has left however many millions to their local food bank, because otherwise they're gonna, they're freezing and they're starving and they've got nowhere to live and nothing to eat, and creativity is hard under those circumstances.
So if you look at historical examples, there are a few that can help us here. When Cuba had the oil cut off in 1991, when the Soviet Union fell, they had a crisis, and the average wage dropped to about $1.50 a week, which was useless.
Yeah.
And so they said, oh, no more money then. Right. So a barter economy started up.
Yep.
Now,
And everybody started growing things in their own back garden.
but also not just food, but everything. And so I'm not saying we're going to go to a barter economy, although that's obviously one of the vectors. What I'm saying is a parallel system will arise when it has no other choice but to be there.
A parallel monetary system or
So
parallel economic system, or
all of the above.
okay.
Everything that makes us up as a human society is a series of interlocking systems. And one by one, those systems are going to be put under stress. Right, like food. Where do we get our food from? It's not just money. You can have money, but not food. But you
Yeah,
can also have
that's
food, but not
how.
money too, and so on.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so because of the way we are, and as money systems are virtual, and our dependency on technology, right, this is going to be a rough and very steep learning curve for much of society, but it doesn't have to be for everyone. The awakening, what I call the awakening, is going to happen unevenly. You know,
Mm.
the future's here, but it's not evenly distributed. Right.
Yes.
So is the solutions. Right. So is the solution space. And some areas will do okay, and some areas won't. Right. And it's going to be rough. And we're going to have the people who will get through this. And am I one? I'd like to think so, but I don't. It's not. You know, we're not there yet. But the people to get through this, we're going to have to be stronger than the generation that fought World War II. But not just
Yeah.
physically stronger, mentally
But,
resilient and emotionally resilient, but also emotionally wise.
mm.
And that
And
last part hasn't happened yet anywhere else in history.
not
Emotion.
even in Cuba when the oil embargo
So,
started, because it seemed to me that was a country
yeah,
that pulled together and
they did pull together, right?
made things happen.
But when I say emotionally wise, the Cubans did like a short-term solution for their society, and they've had a replication of the system as it is now. It's like a version of the American system done differently.
Okay.
But emotionally
Okay. It's
wise,
predicated on the old
yeah,
paradigm.
yeah. And so
Yep.
we're talking about a new emotional paradigm
Okay.
between each other
Yep.
and ourselves. At the moment, the
Conscious
individual,
evolution. Yes.
yeah. So the individual has got to be emotionally wise to the point where no matter what is thrown at them, they don't lose their shit and turn to violence.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And we will see a lot of that in some sectors, but it's not going to work.
No. No.
Or one very
Happening
well,
already. There's a lot of
but
violence.
but
But
at
this
one
is making me
they're not.
think a lot of. I had a conversation with Eleanor Lada and Lynn Murphy a couple of podcasts ago, and they were talking about the that we're in a trauma culture and we need to move forward into an initiation culture, and that the indigenous cultures are all initiation cultures, and that one of the keys of an initiation culture is that you've had this contained encounter with death that
Hmm.
takes you to the edges of yourself. And when you have had a contained encounter with death and you come through it, you are naturally wiser
Yeah,
most
that's
of the
true.
time, provided you've found your own inner resource and you've realized that you can only become fully yourself connected with other people. So with any luck, our contained encounter with death, when the economy falls off a cliff or whatever it is that happens, brings us to this point of evolution into the initiation culture. Let's, if the ascension happens, as you're saying, and you may not have finished, please carry on.
Yeah.
Where does it take us, or what do you think are the avenues? What could people do now, I suppose, is the question.
Right. Okay. So a lot of our see, this is just the words and labels I'm using, uh, and there are other ways to describe this. Just to finish off what I was saying before, when I was a younger man, I used to go and seek out military veterans, men who've actually been through terrible, terrible things,
Mm,
um, and talk to them. It occurred to me that, for example, my generation, I'm 50 years old now, and my generation was the first generation, as I saw it back then, that did not have to go off to war. My father had Vietnam, and then before that was Korea, before that, and so on. And so, and what struck me was everyone who had lived through, you know, that series on TV, Band of Brothers,
mm,
the more specific. And so, when I watched those, that's not entertainment. That's so that really happened. And if
mm,
I was in that situation, how would I deal with that? And so, when I talk to these people, these guys would actually sort of they wouldn't talk about what happened to them because they don't, and there's a reason for that. But what they all want is what we've already got and take for granted: a nice little house somewhere, running water, bit of money, bit of food, their family around them,
mm,
all the quiet stuff. Leave me alone.
mm, mm,
But our modern society has actually made itself so complex and so dependent on consumerism, and we're so determined, and we keep upping the ante of what we want each year. Right, all of that has to be cleaned out,
mm,
right, and replaced with something. We've got to start valuing people, not things. We've got to start valuing ideas, not things,
mm,
and so on. And that sets off a chain reaction. And so And also, so we've got to become emotionally wise. We've actually got to want to do that, not because we have to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
And not everyone will do it, and not all parts of society will go along with that. But the ones that do will find it much easier. And the ones that don't, it'll be harder and harder to do the basics.
Okay. I remember you had 3 classes of people on one of our previous podcasts, and this was the Arcadians.
So, yeah, they're the Acadians. You had the Cornucopians who were determined.
Business as usual will go on forever.
Yeah.
And the
And then,
Vikings, who we renamed pirates, I
yeah,
believe.
or
Colonizers.
the bloody Romans.
Yes, that was
Um,
it. Yes. Yes.
and then you had the prepper community, and then you had the Acadians. So again, these are just labels to try and get your arms around what we're seeing here. So where we will go is we will clear out all the blind spots. Right. For example, what's happening at the moment, I believe the commodities industry has been misunderstood. We've assumed that these raw materials will always be available to us, and we can snap our fingers and they're given to us because, well, we're special. We're rich, we're special.
And the market will provide, because that's what markets do, obviously.
Right. And so, whereas the free market enterprise mentality is going to move into an era where we're the problem that has to be solved. Are you the solution or are you the precipitate? Yeah.
That only works when you did chemistry at school.
And so,
But yes.
so well, you get it. So that's all that really matters, really. So anyway, so this is where we're going. Now, if I might share my screen.
Yeah, I gave you co-host, so you should be able to.
Okay. This is what I'm actually presenting tomorrow.
Ooh,
You like the title?
exciting.
White Swans, and the Purple Transition.
Oh, and you're presenting this to the British Embassy in
I am
Finland?
in
In
Finland.
Helsinki. Wow. There we go.
The
Whoa.
Sins.
We're now
Right.
seeing your whole screen, your whole
And
desktop.
so, hang on. So
I could probably hack your computer based on that.
yeah,
Here we go.
I get hacked all the time. The trick is not to get worried about that.
And we're not blurring out your slides. Just tell the listeners very briefly about the blurring of the slides, because that just blew my mind.
So I've been in a number of situations. I have to remember that I've upset a multi-trillion-dollar industry, and I will face opposition that will be at an emotional level. They are most displeased with the fact that I'm still breathing oxygen.
Yeah.
Right. So there was a meeting that was arranged in Brussels between me and my critics, and I was to get up and present my work. And when I did, on the screen, everything was just that little bit blurred, and you could sort of squint and make it out, but it really wasn't clear to the people in the audience. And when I got off the stage, I said, "Come on, guys." And I said, "Yeah, sorry about that." Russell there, he was twiddling with the lens, and we fixed it now.
Yeah, right. Right. But the outcome of that was that people in the audience, because you still had your laptop, you could still read the figures that they weren't able to see, and there were significant people in the audience who wanted to know more, which strikes me as a win for you, really.
When you were actually presenting to a hostile audience, it would behove you to actually know your work so well that if they take away all your props, like your PowerPoint, your computer, you can you've got everything at your fingertips and nothing stops you.
Right. Well done.
Right. And my managers saw all that, and they realized that my competitors, my critics, had nothing of substance to stop me.
Right.
So they continued to support my work. So it was useful.
Yay. Well done. So here we go. So the British Embassy, so the effing expletive deleted government in the UK cannot pretend they don't know what you were just about to tell us. So go for it.
I've already talked to them on a number of occasions, and they do get it. They just don't know what to do.
Also, they're being led by idiots. But let's leave that to one side, because
hang on. So is the stupid leading the blind, or is the blind leading the stupid?
Oh, yeah.
It's a common problem. Anyway, so the commodities industry is misunderstood. So can you actually see that?
No, it's we can see here a human society a bit on the right, and then there's a blank space under commodities section. Okay, finance and economics, sometimes about technology.
Okay, all right. So when we're describing how things are going, you see it on the 6 o'clock news. How are things going? That they lead off with the stock market. The stock market is this. An extra $1 trillion was invented today.
Yes, quite.
Right. And sometimes I'll talk about technology, but it's all about the money. But what really happens is this. When you're actually talking about energy or technology or minerals or economics, you can't separate them. Where there's one, there's the other three. Right. Now, they all harvesting raw material, feedstock out of the natural environment.
Mm.
That's how we really are. That's how we've always been. And so any new system will have to have that similar structure. What's happening to us, though, is the relationship between all four aspects and us and the planetary environment is changing in ways that we can't control. Right. So there's actually four aspects happening at the same time.
Okay.
Right. So energy has to change. And so this is what I've got to the thorium. Every energy system that I've looked at has a bottleneck. One of them has to evolve.
Right.
And so the thing that actually is ready to go, I think, is something that was developed 50 years ago. This is molten salt liquid fuel fission using thorium as the fuel.
Brilliant. You talked about that in our last podcast.
Yeah,
And
okay, you've already seen this then. All right. So
well, no, people may not have, so
okay,
don't
all
go
right.
too fast.
Okay, so this is the status report of, it's an outcome of of several decades of research. It was published in 1972. Basically, it worked. And so this is what they're talking about. So thorium fluoride, which is quite a stable thing, it's not radioactive, it's fertile. Thorium-232 has a half-life of 14 billion years. So it's quite stable. So you put it in a salt and you put it in the reactor and you bombard it with neutrons. Right. And
14 billion years. Is that not longer than the lifespan of the Earth?
It is.
Okay. Just checking.
What it means is thorium's very stable. So we're going to bombard it with neutrons, and those neutrons are going to change atomically at an isotope level the thorium through several stages of change to uranium-233. Right, it's an isotope of uranium. Now that is quite radioactive, and it's going to heat up because it's hot. Things that are radioactive are often hot, and that will melt the salt. And the salt goes into a liquid. And so inside the reactor, where it's all protected and everything, it starts to circulate as a liquid. Right, now that liquid flows around and it goes into a heat chamber that exchanges heat between that salt and another fluid, which heats it up. That heat is then used to turn water into steam. Steam turns the turbine creates electricity.
Okay.
So you've got this molten salt going around the circuit, and you don't need water to cool this down like a normal reactor.
Okay, because water is going to be one of our rate limiting steps. That's a good thing.
But like a conventional nuclear reactor needs an enormous
huge amount of water. Yeah.
This doesn't. So the reaction can only go so far before it starts to overrun itself and collapse. Right, and if it gets too hot, for example, the reaction collapses.
Okay.
So we can't have a meltdown like Fukushima.
Okay. So the chemical reaction is heat labile. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Okay. It can only go so far. So it's got to be kept below a certain temperature so it doesn't collapse.
Okay.
And a collapse for them is it just stops. Oh man, start up again. Okay. And so, but then they've also got a freeze plug where if the temperature does go past a certain point, that freeze plug melts, and the fuel as a liquid just drains out of the reactor into containment facilities, so it just cool down naturally.
Okay.
So there's not one but two fail safes that mean the existing problems with nuclear won't happen. Now,
you mentioned a Doppler shift in a previous podcast,
that's actually the term for the cascading of the chain reaction in the nuclear thermal cross section of the neutrons, converting everything from thorium to uranium. And so more and more uranium has to be created, and then gets to a certain point where it overruns and not enough uranium is being created, and then it decays out.
Okay, so I will map that onto a red-blue shift at some point in my brain. Carry on, because it will take us to places people don't want to go. Go on.
So here is the 1969 7.4 megawatt reactor that first started with a uranium salt and went to a thorium salt, 6,000 hours of power generation without a problem. Here is the Chinese system that's actually commercially selling power now.
2 megawatts. How much does that power, roughly?
A small town.
Okay. Wow.
So a normal size reactor is something like 1,400 megawatts. This is 2.
Okay.
So it's
I love the Chinese flag in the background.
Yeah, well, they did that on purpose, didn't they?
Yes.
So Now, I've been told that this is actually generating power.
Wow.
But someone
Okay.
also said, "Oh, yeah, you can't believe those guys." But yeah, I'm seeing it in other places as well.
Yeah, because you were in Denmark recently.
Right. So I've got some photos of that. So this is the actual thing we'll go through. Like this is the bottom line is your conventional uranium system, where we're going to generate 10,000 gigawatt hours of electrical power. 96% of that fuel is actually not useful in that reaction, but it's still very, very good.
96%.
So for 32.9 tons of fuel going in, 31 tons comes out.
And somebody thought this was a good idea once.
Well,
Blinking heck.
money is involved.
And nuclear weapons are involved. Yep. Okay, carry
And
on.
so now we're going to do it with thorium. So in uranium, we're going to mine 123 million tons of ore and then compress it down to 32 tons of fuel. Here we've got 280 tons of monazite mineral sands. So already the system's smaller.
Hmm.
And we're going to make 1.34 tons of thorium fluoride salt with other things like lithium and beryllium in it.
Okay.
So
To
this is
create the same amount of power
yeah
over the same time.
yeah.
Right.
This slide was put together by Kirk Sorensen, and I've just repurposed it. And so
So for
anyway,
those who can't see the slide, because some people are listening to this, both of these, so 123 million tons of uranium ore as opposed to 280 tons,
of
so
monazite.
orders of magnitude smaller,
That's
each
right.
create 10,000 gigawatt hours of electricity for 365 days.
Yeah. Now the waste that comes out of the thorium molten salt reactor is between 1% and 5% of radioactive isotopes that need storage. Now those
Right.
isotopes, you store them for 300 years, not
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 10,
that.
100,000 years.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right,
gosh.
but also here's the funny part: a lot of those isotopes are actually used in a medical medical context, like medical radioactive isotopes,
Okay, yep,
and there's things like xenon, cesium, and strontium, and
yep.
all that. And so they could actually be repurposed into the medical
You
industry.
could in fact sell them,
It,
as opposed to having to persuade some poor person to find a place to hide all your uranium that's not going to destroy
so
the entire planet.
now what's weird is this system can burn up also uranium, but you could have small portions of spent nuclear fuel in the nuclear stockpile and process it as fuel. It sits in the molten salt and stays there till it's processed. So we can
Okay.
slowly run down the existing pile of spent nuclear fuel.
Oh, okay. That would be handy.
Um, so now things get really interesting.
Okay.
Here is a picture of me wearing a tie.
Yeah. Yes, Simon, not in the Superman t-shirt. That's very smart.
Right. And I happen to be standing in front of a thorium molten salt reactor.
Which has thorium in it. Is it working?
It's a test rig.
Okay.
And so this one doesn't have thorium in it. This has actually got another molten salt in it, and it's to test the water circuit. This is a group called Copenhagen Atomics
Okay.
in Copenhagen. They're making reactors the size of a shipping container, like a
I was
40.
going to say, for people who can't see this, this is not the size of a nuclear power station. It is a shipping container.
Yeah.
Exactly that.
So that's actually the size of a 20-foot shipping container. It's one half of the system. So each commercial reactor will be produce 100 megawatts of thermal heat or 40 megawatts of electricity. And the size of the reactor is a 40-foot shipping container that sits on the back of a truck. So they're going to make them in this factory and they're going to ship them out on a truck. So they'll arrive in a truck, put it over there, thanks, and then you get to work.
And are they going? Yeah, and there we are. Electricity will be sold at 2 cents per kilowatt hour. So they're not actually going to sell you
The
the stuff
reactor,
on the
no.
truck. They're just going to sell you the power.
So they want to own the reactor and the fuel in it. All the fuel for 50 years is loaded into the reactor, and they will take responsibility for running it.
And that's a tiny, tiny fraction of what our government.
Yep.
They promised the Chinese and the French, I think it's 80 pence per kilowatt hour
Yep.
for a standard nuclear power station that is never going to be built and is not safe. And these guys are wanting to sell it at 2 cents per
2
kilowatt
cents a
hour. So
kilowatt.
that's like 1/80th of what the
And the
UK
funny
government is.
part is the fuel is actually going to be made out of industrial waste at a mine site. Yep.
So, Simon, we talked about a little bit about this in our last podcast, and one of the things that when we finished, I went away and was really quite scared about is this is the answer to a lot of the business as usual prayers because it could allow the existing system, the death cult, to continue to power itself without the rest of us going, you're worsening the climate emergency. This is a carbon-free power source. And yet a lot of our biophysical collapse is not just coming from the carbon. There's a lot of other aspects, but the carbon is the one that people know about. How is this not going to just accelerate us off the edge of the cliff with a power source? Because I looked at the energy turnover, energy invested, and it looked like 2,000 to 1 or something, which
So
is just
those
amazing.
numbers of 2000 to 1, I've yet to actually see the maths behind that.
Okay,
It's
but
such
it's
a
still high.
wildly high number. I'm not sure. I want to see the actual numbers before I have
Okay, all right, before we
But
commit to that, but it's still,
the answer to your
it's
question,
big.
it won't arrive fast enough before the system changes. If
Do
the
you reckon?
first reactor is commercially sold in 2028, which is what they're talking about, right, and they're going to produce one a day, how many
Okay,
of the reactors and so they're not going
okay.
to get out fast enough while the rest of the system is fragmenting, where people at large will saying, we've got a problem.
Yes. And who's going to have those one a day? We're going to be fighting over the
And
first
so,
365 iterations of,
yeah,
hey, you can
so
have power at the bottom of your road that will power your entire town.
I think there'll be a
Wow.
number of companies building these,
Okay.
uh, but the problems we're seeing are visible now,
Mm.
right? And I think next year, a lot of the problems are going to be so visible that we're all going to see them. And we're not going to get, at the moment when you try and talk about certain problems and you meet with pushback whether that problem even exists.
Yeah, this is
Right?
what you were saying at the beginning. Like we can now talk about peak oil and maybe we can talk
Yeah,
about the fact that we need carbon-free power. Do you not think that if you show this to the British consulate, embassy in Helsinki, and they come
all the
back
friends.
to the current UK government, which is as corrupt as it seems humanly possible to be, they're just going to put a lot of money to their friends,
Mhm.
like they did during COVID, and going, build us some thorium reactors, because that's going to answer a lot of our problems,
I would
and we will
suggest
own
that
them.
they would touch up Rolls-Royce and say, fix it. And
Exactly.
Rolls-Royce
Uh,
might already be doing it.
oh, UAE, not UAE. Yes, BAE. Sorry.
And so,
Yes.
yeah, and so they will, but it won't arrive fast enough. It won't arrive, because even if they do that immediately and they start rolling it and the solution starts happening in one part, whole sections of the community are going to hit other problems where they are going to be forced to see them.
Okay.
We're there now,
All right.
right?
I hope you're right.
Well, we're there now, and when the oxygen's turned off from a lot of the existing systems, for example, China no longer exports stuff to us,
Mm.
and we can no
Oh, that's
longer
all our stuff gone. Where else does it come from these
and we
days?
can no longer import gas and coal, not because we're running out of gas and coal, but for geopolitical reasons, because we like picking fights with the people who sell us the stuff.
Right.
Now what? Or the other one that's coming in next year, I think, is food. There's now food shortages on the books,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially the fertilizer industry is in a stress position.
Oh, good. Well, we need less fertilizer. That would be a good thing. We
But
could
then
just
you have
all
the
move towards regenerative agriculture. It might be a better answer.
so that's what I'm saying is none of us will do that willingly. But what if we
Okay.
didn't have a choice? Then you watch us become experts real quick.
Okay. Particularly if people like you and I have been blazing a trail and going, the answers are here.
People have to
Here are
see
the
the
answers.
answer. If they see the answer and they understand that there's a problem, right, and going towards the answer is actually easier than sticking with the problem, then they'll do it.
Okay.
So anyway, so 1 gram of thorium or uranium produces 24 megawatts of hours of thermal energy. So a plant producing 1 gigawatt of electricity, where they're going to, you can stitch a lot of these together in a modular form, would consume 800 kilograms of thorium-232 metal a year.
Okay. Which is, that's
Bugger
a
all.
truckload, basically, isn't it?
Well, but by the time you got it in salt form, that's probably say 5 ton.
Okay. Wow.
And a truck has 20 tons.
Yep. Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah, that's the small load that I get them to deliver to the yard.
so commercial
Ay,
reactors are coming on 2028. All right. So this is the first of the white swans.
Okay.
Swan is when it lands, everyone's, oh no, and they run around like headless chickens. We're doomed. It's not going to work. A white swan will disrupt everything, saying, we've now got something fantastic. It will help us. This is the
Okay.
first. The next one is ammonia-fueled internal combustion engines. Now, the electric vehicle fleet, which is supposed to be the replacement for fossil fuel petroleum,
Yeah.
or hydrogen fuel cell, both have their problems.
Oh, we spoke to a gentleman who made hydrogen fuel cells 3 podcasts ago. It looked really quite compelling to me, but the question we didn't get answered was how do you produce the hydrogen
So
and
how do
distribute
you
it?
produce the hydrogen in quantity? So you can produce it in a small quantity, but can we produce such a lot of it, transport it and store it? And the amount of hydrogen we need is enormous. So how much extra expansion do we need in the electrical power grid? That's where the trouble starts.
So actually what you need is a thorium reactor to produce your hydrogen to power your car. But anyway, okay, so ammonia
that has problems too, but that's where the hydrogen fuel cells work quite well and is a mature technology. So what Toyota have done, now I actually spoke to the Toyota guys. They picked up my work and I actually met them at a conference. And they said, look, we want to get out from under the Chinese umbrella of influence. And, we understand that there's a mineral supply problem. What do we do? And so they looked at my stuff and then they said, okay, all right, there's a problem. And then they disappeared. And now they've come back. They've leaped over hydrogen fuel cells because to make ammonia, you need to have hydrogen first. But ammonia is in a better position to store and transport.
Hang on a second, but ammonia is NH4. Are you burning the ammonia? Does that not produce NOxes, which are like 300 times more greenhouse gas equivalent than carbon?
So you burn the ammonia, and then the gas is then captured, and then it's transformed into something. I forget what the outcome is. I forget what the
You
outcome.
must be gathering the nitrous oxides of nitrous
There's
oxide
like
somehow.
a catalytic converter that does something like that, but I don't know the full process yet. But what they've done is they've leapfrogged over hydrogen, and they said, "Look, here is an ammonia ICE." Oh, you okay?
Yep, yeah, COVID overhang. So is ammonia, because you can liquefy it, is it easier to transport? Is that the thing?
That is correct.
Okay.
You put it into like on a low pressure tank and it liquefies up nicely. It's easier to transport than hydrogen, and you can store it much easier.
But it probably doesn't explode if you put it near a spark either.
It is a flammable liquid, but not as flammable.
Okay.
Whereas hydrogen, when it becomes a gas, that's extremely flammable. Whereas ammonia, when it becomes a gas, it is flammable, but it needs a stronger flame to do it.
Okay.
Right. Anyway, so what you've got here is a passenger car that can run on ammonia, and you've got a container ship that can run on ammonia. Now, we've got the same problem. Can you make the ammonia? But another question is, can you make the ammonia out of seawater? Because one of the things with hydrogen, you can't put seawater through an electrolysis cell because the salt water is a pollutant, becomes a problem. You've got to desalinate the water first.
Which takes power, so you end up with your energy return being considerably less than your energy invest.
And so
okay. So what's the EROI of
ammonia? I don't
ammonia?
know. I don't know. These are one of the things I've yet to actually do. If you see it in terms of they're providing a service, they're providing a system of a fuel that can be stored and then moved around like we move petroleum around.
Right. So you could use the old infrastructure? Could we use the...
We can repurpose the existing infrastructure, but we don't need things like massive amounts of battery charging banks and charging stations. That's something that society is not quite ready for yet. And the raw materials behind this are not limited in the same way.
It doesn't require that you dig up the seabed or destroy the entire nations of Africa, which seems to be what the lithium is going to do.
And you can actually repurpose existing internal combustion engines.
Oh, really? Wow.
To a point. Even if you rip them apart and recycle them, you can do that. They're the same component. You could actually sort of take out your internal combustion engine petrol system, put an ammonia system in, and your car will go. Right. There's practical problems here, but there's less practical problems for this than there are for electric vehicles or hydrogen fuel cells as a whole system.
Okay.
Right. So, and so I'm of the opinion this has the death knell for the electric vehicle market. The batteries problems and everything. And so that's...
Oh, the Germans are going to love that.
Well, like I said, upsetting people seems to be
Yeah,
my
no, it does. Yes,
my
yes. But I
hobby.
mean, it's not you. This is Toyota, and I guess
Yeah.
Nissan's not that thrilled either, or Renault. I mean, what the heck? We've got to find ways of...
General Motors has also rolled back electric vehicle production. I think they're going to go the same way.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
anyway, okay, we've been through that.
Yep.
Right. So
Ching.
remember this one here. This is a pyramid.
Yes.
So we've got two sides. There's application and then there's power generation. Right. So application is transport. At the moment, it's internal combustion petroleum. Then we've got electricity generation and manufacture. All of that stuff comes through that tetrahedron. So we've got oil, gas, and coal. And now we've got nuclear. So petroleum's being phased out. Okay. Now we've got all this other stuff to phase out petroleum, like solar, wind, hydro, what have you. We want solar and wind to be the primary energy source going forward, or so we are told. Now, we'd also want to use electric vehicles. There's biofuels, and there's a hydrogen fuel cell. So electric vehicles have a problem. Hang on, let me move that around. Yeah, electric vehicles have the problem of we don't have the raw materials for the batteries. Now, you can make batteries out of something other than lithium, fine, but we're not going to be able to replace copper or nickel or graphite. Right. And there are all limits.
Yep.
So they're going. Biofuels, we can only make so much biomass.
Like the planet uses up a lot of water and it's taking our agriculture. It's an extremely bad idea.
So that's going.
Good.
The hydrogen fuel cell has limitations in the storage and transport of hydrogen.
Okay.
You do it at a small scale, but not in the billions. So that's going.
Oh, great.
Wind and solar. Right, now that the buffer to manage the intermittency of wind and solar is enormous. We don't have the technology to store that amount of power for that amount of time. So wind and solar are going. Everything else, hydro, geothermal, biowaste, and wave, all have limitations to expansion on how many of these sites we can actually deploy. And we don't just need one or two, we need thousands of them. Right, so each one, there's only so many places that we can actually put up. And so they have their place, but they're not going to be the primary energy systems. So nuclear, if we now call it conventional nuclear, or the light water reactors that have been developed in the 50s that we are still using, that can't expand fast enough to be useful.
Yes, I also remember hearing you say that even if we could, we'd run out of uranium.
So we can actually find more uranium, right? But uranium we're wasting most of it. Right, so if you go through all our reserves and all the way to unconventional, it takes about 75 years. But because it takes so long to build one of these massive stations, we're only getting about 60% of the way where we need to be the primary energy source. So even if we could, it was the amount of reactors we would have to build and the associated infrastructure to support them is huge.
Yes. Okay.
Right, and then you've got the problem of, well, now what?
100,000 years of nuclear waste coming out the other end.
No.
Okay.
So conventional nuclear is not going to work either. Now, what is the elephant in the room that hasn't been discussed yet is this is really an economy of heat. We use
my system that's ping. Can you hear pings at your end? Sorry, Simon. Is something pinging or is it at my end?
I can't hear any pinging, no.
Oh, flip, it must be mine. Anyway, carry on. Okay.
Take notes, guys.
Yes, I apologize. Carry on. Okay, so coal, we need coal to manufacture.
So
yes.
Heat, we use heat. Like to make a solar panel, for example, we heat up silicon to 2,200 degrees Celsius, and we use coal to do it. So all electricity comes from heat as well. Right, so and until we actually fix this, if we phase out coal tomorrow, most of our manufacturing would stop.
Yeah.
Right, so then now we've got some of the solutions. Internal combustion ammonia, where the pertinent question is, can we produce the ammonia from seawater?
And what power do we use to produce it?
Right, and if we can use heat to do that, then it'll work. And to make hydrogen by splitting the water, we need heat around 800 to 1,000 degrees Celsius, whereas nuclear is generally down in the 560 degrees Celsius. So it needs an accelerant, or we're going to have to burn it from something else. Then we've got the liquid fuel fission, thorium, right, MSR, right, and so that's the map. So we're instead of solar being the primary energy source, now I think it's going to go to liquid fuel fission, thorium. So here's the map now. And there's a third piece missing, and that is the combustion of iron oxide powder to produce high temperature. Now, that's not part of this discussion. It's just an idea I'm throwing in. But 3 basic technologies are going to be the foundation going forward. Iron oxide powder, when you burn it, can achieve temperatures of about 1800 degrees Celsius. And the powder that comes out of that can be converted back to a useful form. So it's partially recycled, but you're consuming energy to do it.
So you oxidize iron oxide. What do you get out at the other end?
So you get like an iron powder. I forget the exact chemical terminology, but you start with iron powder and you oxidize it, and it's an exothermic reaction.
Okay, interesting.
And then you actually then convert it back with hydrogen, of all things. So that's got to be thought through, and that's why it's grey, not black.
Okay.
So anyway, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the purple transition.
Which gets us away from the 7 colors of hydrogen, which always upset me somewhat. So, but this is all hinging on our thorium molten salt, which you said cannot come online probably before the 2030s in any numbers.
That's true, but we will have fossil fuels until then, and we have no choice but to keep using them because we have no substitute yet.
If we continue to use fossil fuels at the rate that we will continue to use them, Jevons paradox being what it is, and nobody's showing any signs of reducing, what do you think the global temperature is going to be as a result?
I don't know, but what I think is we're going to be forced into a degrowth cycle by virtue of other parts of the system breaking down.
Before the thorium molten salt comes online.
So we're not talking about a seamless transition from one system to another and everything continues. The wheels are going to fall off in the worst possible way. We're all going to see all those problems, and we're going to understand those problems. Yes, there are problems.
What can we do? So tell us a little bit, because I have no idea what the time is, to be honest, but we've been talking a long time. Kiitos. Thank you. Tell us a little bit about the Prometheus project or the Venus project, just so that we understand possibilities of what's coming down the line.
Okay. So what I'm actually sort of talking about here is I've presented my work now over 200 times to people all over the world at various different sort of groups of seniority. About a third of the time it's been to government in some form. Now, in every single one of those presentations to my face, there has been the same 3 basic reactions. One, a shock, like they're completely unprepared. Second was they were not able to refute my work even when they were given time to do so.
Right. That's telling.
And they would often get me back a second and third time, or they'd pass me on to another...
To try and refute it. Hey, guys, we've got someone else to tell you why you're wrong. No.
I think it's also a case of these ideas are so challenging, they need to hear it several times so they can actually digest it.
Yes, and work out how to tell their population that this is the case. Anyway, go on.
That part they don't know yet. They don't know what to do. Right, so that's the thing. They're not refuting it. They just don't know what to do.
Right.
And so the second thing, and the third thing is, and this is where I'm getting at, every single one of them would look me in the eye and says, "What do we do?"
Right. Right.
Now, I'm just a guy with a cheap computer and an internet connection, and those guys with the resources of their entire government department are asking me what to do. No, so what I was saying is I actually had to go away and think about this, and it turns out I'm not noticeably smarter than the next person, but I just happen to be in the right place at the right time with the information at my fingertips that I am in a position to say something and do something.
And you're thinking, Simon, you think outside the box. This is a big thing. But anyway, go on.
There's a box. Sorry.
That's why the governments get stuck, because all their people they only get their job because they can't think outside the box. Anyway, go on.
Allowed to, I suppose. So what that told me was what needed to happen, where it needed to happen, where it could not happen, who will do it, and who will not do it. And so what I'm so saying is the solutions that are in front of us now, we all intuitively can see and feel them, right? But when we try and actually get them going in our current society,
Yes, this
they
is Thrutopian stuff.
They never seem to get there.
Yeah.
And because like a system will defend its own survival, it will defend itself to the bitter end. A paradigm will defend it for its own existence. Right. So these solutions have to manifest outside the Western world. Right. So we have to sort of get outside the developed world, and we have to go somewhere completely new. The other thing is starting from scratch, going to a place where there's nothing, and building a new system for the first time ever. Right. We can now actually start to think about, well, we've got to build the whole system, which means every part of the system now can be thought about, and we don't waste too much time or lose too much time by doing something new. Whereas if you go to an existing town or city and say, oh, I'm going to do an idea, and that idea then has to be embedded with everything else, right? Then
yes, the
existing
bureaucracy will
system,
just bog you down. Okay.
For example, the building code. Like one of the innovations I want to do is revolutionize building technology. Make geopolymers out of rock and smelter slag and volcanic ash, and then make like a concrete alternative and start 3D printing buildings. There's all sorts of stuff, but they won't let you do that in the Western world for the building code.
I think you might find Portugal does, because traditional Dream Factory is 3D printing their buildings. But yeah, where are you going to go then? Where are you going?
Right. So there's about 5 or 6 sites around the world that I'm looking at. Each one has their pros and cons. The most advanced is somewhere in South America. I'm not going to say much more than that because details are still being discussed.
Yeah.
Like things like leases. We want to lease several hundred years long.
Right.
I don't want to build a city and then have a year 2 or 3, the owners turn up and say, yeah, we want our land back now, bye. So
or we're going to charge you rent of several squillions.
We're going to change the rent agreement.
Yeah.
So the idea is to actually bring on board an innovation hub. Now, if I may share my screen.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what I call Venus evolution. Can you see it?
Yes, we can. Yeah. Thank you. Yep.
So this is Venus evolution. This is an evolution of the Venus Project. Now, the Venus Project was developed in the 70s by Jacques Fresco and his partner, Roxanne Meadows. And Jacques passed on a couple of years ago, and Roxanne has a team of people around her, and they're developing now. So my work is now merging with theirs. Now, the original form of the Venus Project belongs in another time, and they didn't have things like energy restraints or commodity restraints to deal with.
Okay.
So their work's merging with mine, and the vision is this: an evolution of the Venus Project powered by an unconventional energy source operating to a new resources management paradigm is now proposed. The plan will have elements of the circular economy, the steady state economy, permaculture, regenerative agriculture, degrowth, and the Venus Project, all of which will now merge with resource constraint boundary conditions, both my work and my friend and colleague Harold Svedrup. And so we will construct a technology innovation hub in an unconventional city to the purpose of developing a new energy, raw materials, and manufacture paradigm operated by a new kind of society. We seek to develop a more sustainable relationship with the planetary natural environment and a comprehensive plan for social reclamation in which human beings, technology, and nature will be able to coexist in the long-term sustainable state of dynamic equilibrium. We wish to leave our grandchildren a world worth living in. Right. So
you're doing it. You are going to create a Thrutopia, this world that we would be proud to leave to the generations that come after us. You are building this.
So this will start as a chain reaction. We start small, and the chain reaction will continue. We're going to operate on 3 fronts. And so if I can Come on, computer, do your job. Right, so we want to build a society that's ethical and strong.
Mm.
And so this is what we have to do. We have to accept our past without regret, handle our present with confidence, and face our future without fear. Because at the moment, there's a lot of discussion in the solution space that involves humanity being punished
Yes,
and
yes,
actual solutions
absolutely.
being sabotaged.
Yep.
And
Yes.
evolution has to happen on two fronts. There we go. Two fronts. One is industrial agriculture has to be reinvented, because that's where a lot of the large-scale pollution is happening. The other one is our industrial systems have to evolve where they don't have such a massive waste plume, and they have to shrink in size. And the planetary environment now must be merged with the human systems so we can all stabilize.
Yep.
That's what we're looking at. I love this photo. Hey,
Okay,
change
for
the
the people
rules.
listening, it's a photo of a gentleman underwater looking at his wheelchair. So he looks like he's standing under a swimming pool, and he's got his feet on the floor, and he's looking down at the wheelchair that presumably he started off in.
Yeah, so it's just a
It's a possibility
yeah.
picture.
So here's another one. Perhaps you remember this one. My wife
Yes,
Tanya is an
Tanya.
artist. So we're going to evolve, doing things better, revolutionary, doing better things, and accidental, exploiting the unexpected. So
Woohoo. And then we become gods. Yay.
and then we become gods. And so, hang on, let me move this away. Again, my wife's artwork.
Beautiful.
So it's actually the legend of the Orphic egg, where you've got the serpent wrapped around the egg.
Around the egg, it looks like almost like an Ouroboros egg also.
And the egg itself, by legend, this is an old Greek legend, contains a chunk of the mundane universe before structures were put into it. So it's like a starting point. It's like the starting point. The alchemical legends have the same thing. This is the starting point of all things. Once it breaks out, we can actually create something new again without influence from the past. Right. When the orthodox methodologies prove to be inadequate, turn to the unorthodox or accept failure. Use the past unorthodox ideas differently in conjunction with present cutting-edge technology to create a new paradigm where future limitations are seen in a new light. Industrial evolution is at the crossroads between ruin and the stars. What have we really learned? So a lot of this is that we are both the problem and the solution, how we think.
Yep.
So now we're getting ugly. We must change our paradigm.
Yep.
So we
paradigm shift, absolutely fundamental.
We all want a magic bullet to solve all things. We want like a solution that fixes everything.
Yes, but without having to do anything. Yes.
And they want someone else to develop the solution. Yeah, the market will fix it. Or what often I hear is when human innovation, you hear things like human innovation is really powerful. When people say that, what they're really doing is trying to shut down the conversation, and they don't want to hear about these things. Leave me alone.
Yep.
Right. So it's a river in Egypt. That's also pretty powerful.
Yes.
So then when an idea becomes visible, we go from denial to we want to take it for ourselves to get rich. It's the most frustrating thing I see all the time, almost on a daily basis. Yep. Right. So we want to patch up the existing system with a straight substitution. We don't think in terms of evolution. We want the horse and cart. Right, now we've got a thing called the car, where we take away the horse, but we've still got this thing with four wheels that moves around on roads. Now we're going to take away the petrol car and we want to put in an EV. Right, we're substituting the same thing. We're not actually evolving any other part of the system. So all existing systems are based on ideology with little practical thinking, which is why many of them look like a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. So, all right, so this is it'll be easier to start, and you can't go to a place where an existing system's already there. It'd be easier to start from scratch, because when you're building everything from scratch, you've got to build everything, so it's easier to build something new.
Yep.
You don't have to sort of, if you're going to build a city, for example, all the plumbing and all the storm drains and everything, and if you don't have any people living there, you can build it in peace. You don't have to try and sort of maneuver around.
It's not evolving up from being a village. You can just start.
And
can you build in some kind of resilience such that when the next generation comes along and has a better idea of storm drains, they can replace them?
Exactly.
Okay. Yep.
So part of it is evolution's built in, whereas at the moment when we build stuff, we build like we've got all the ideas.
Yeah, quite.
So
Yeah.
so we're going to operate on three fronts. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing there's four circles on the screen. Three of them are in a triangle, and then there's a circle in the center. It's also like a tetrahedron. We want a sustainable human civilization post-fossil fuels. Now, the way we are at the moment, this is very odd. We tend to think, for example, in magic solutions. Solar panels will fix everything. Where do we get solar panels from? Shut up.
China.
Who builds them? Right. So we need an industrial system that sources its own raw materials and has an energy system that's all part of the same thing. And that's my work. Right. But now we also need interaction with the planetary environment. You know, how do we grow our food? How do we live coexistively with, say, natural biosystems? Instead of actually trying to force a situation where we're going to strip resources out of the environment to make money, we're going to coexist with the environment and we can help each other along.
Yep.
And then the third point is the society and a new social contract to manage all this stuff. When you introduce a new technology, everything's different and society changes. Now, at the moment, we think, for example, solar panels, just an example, but let's say solar panels is a planetary and environment interaction plan. It's not. Saw that, cat.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's all right. I like cats. We think, for example, an interaction plan with the environment is solar panels. It's actually not. And we think a new society with a new social contract is solar panels. It's not.
Yeah.
They're separate things. So they have to be developed and stable. And then when they're all together, then we can go into the center of things. What you're looking at here is actually a map of sustainability that's based around the idea of the alchemical philosopher's stone, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So if I call this Jacques Rest, at what point, Jacques Fresco had all these great ideas about how things could go. At what point is society stable enough for him to tools down? Now let's take a break. And so here's Jacques and Roxanne artwork.
Right.
So this is the actual original Venus project, and this is genius. If you were to develop a city where you were to design the city based on the best science had to offer, but the whole design of the city was to optimize the quality of life of the people in the city and be sustainable and the environment.
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Yeah. Which is quite a different question to how can I maximize my profit by ripping everybody off, which is what current cities are based on.
That's right. That's exactly right. And in fact, one of the things we're going to look at is changing the nature of money. That'll be an experiment. So these are the pictures. The Venus Project, the website's up. It is an amazing concept.
Yeah. And it's very green. I think for people, I would encourage you to go onto YouTube. We will put this up on YouTube and have a look at the images, because what really strikes me about this, it looks very space age Star Trek-y, but it's got a lot of green there. The living web of life is thoroughly integrated.
Yep. So this is also built into the idea of like a tropical environment. The environments I'm looking at to work in, because of the energy paradigm I need to put in, has to be on an area that no one else wants.
Right.
I can't be in competition for the locals for whatever. So we're going to go to a patch of land that no one else wants. And so what I'm proposing is a gateway city to make this possible in another step again.
Okay, so do it on a smaller scale to prove as a kind of proof of purpose and proof of concept.
So I'm actually, we'll get to it, but I'm going to build a city of 10,000 people, which will be an innovation hub. So we'll get to that in a moment. So, and Jacques had all these cool ideas of, well, what if we had cities on the sea?
Yeah. So, but then that was hijacked by the network state people, wasn't it? But yes.
So I'm actually looking at a site in South America that's on the coast with a pristine maritime marine environment. And so what if we had a settlement on the sea to interact with? So all right, here we go. Build a city for 10,000 people. Right, so this is the plan. It's going to be something like between 1,500 and 1,600 and 2 kilometers wide in diameter. There's going to be a cultural hub in the center, and there's going to be what we call the Prometheus Institute, which is a research hub wrapped around that. The Prometheus Institute is going to be a series of research groups numbering 2,000 staff of scientists, engineers, technicians, and support staff to do research a variety of ideas and then cross-fertilize. And so here are some basic areas. So here is a, my wife had a crack at visualizing this.
Wow. Yeah. I
And
love the fact it's got a spiral. It looks like a snail shell right in the center. That's beautiful.
So the idea is at the very center, you've got the cultural hub, and then wrapped around that, you've got the working spaces. Wrapped around that, you've got the residential living areas. Wrapped around that, you've got
the farming area,
agriculture areas.
Yeah,
that are going to, it's going to be more spread out than that, because we want to actually have farming areas merged with biosystem areas where you've got natural biosystems, but farming can be moved around in a rotation. Things like grey water circuits and regenerative agriculture and all that.
And you'll need a hospital or at least a medical facility somewhere in there.
So we actually will need medical facilities of a much higher caliber than is normally associated with a 10,000 person city, simply because once we start doing this, we may actually be forced with a situation where people won't talk to us and services. So we need to be more self-sufficient than normal.
Okay.
So school.
Do you not think it's more likely that they'll decide to invade you, frankly, because you'll be doing something that they want?
We'll be open sourcing your, some things will be open sourced. Some like they will just give it to the local community. Some things will be kept confidential, depending on what we do, and some things will be commercialized in an IP hub. But we're going to do it in a way where it's actually easier to do business with us than to actually come and invade us.
Because it seems to me you've been talking to the Chinese government, and they would, I mean, they'll just build one. Surely they'll just look at this. You've got enough of a plan there for them to go, yes, we could do that.
Sure. So they do it. They think they've got it all sorted.
Yep.
So that's what I'm saying. It says, you think you can do this? Off you go.
Go for it. Yeah, no, yes. Because the problem with this is going to be funding it. And the Chinese could just, they could do a dozen tomorrow, couldn't they? I mean, they could fund them.
There is a funding strategy on the ground. But the whole key to survival for me is to give away power. We're going to start out as a private corporation with a job to do, right? It's going to be a much smaller, we're going to start like a small section, like 50 people land, and we're going to start. And then over time, we're going to build. And there'll come a point when we go from a corporation to a society. And when that happens, like I'll be the CEO of this operation, I will then stand down, and then control of this will be handed over to a democratically elected government. And then I'm going to mosey on off to my next project. Right. So, but then by saying I'm going to cede power, what that means is things from the very beginning are built where power is dispersed. So if I'm abducted by aliens or hit by a bus, a few hours later I'm replaced, and the thing goes on. Knocking me out means absolutely nothing.
Yep. Yeah. So it's not hierarchical. I've just been exploring voting systems and quadratic voting and consensus voting and Bardo systems and things. So even working out democratic ways of gathering opinion and consent versus consensus and sociocratic means, even that running as an experiment would be interesting. And then bringing in different economics. I mean, Simon, the potential for this is extraordinary as an experiment in human connectivity and our capacity to live in community again, because we've lived in community for 300,000 years, and then this last 50 years we've decided it's not fun and we don't want to do it anymore. Yeah,
we've made a mess of it. I want this to feel like, this is like a long range idea, but when we could develop a new society, I don't know, everyone who's tried this in the past has failed. So we've got a game theory laboratory to actually look at like what might work and what might. So we'll get to that in a moment. I would like this to feel like a society where sacred feminine collaborates with sacred masculine. Right? And so that's a fundamentally different society that is also technologically based and has a intimate relationship with the natural environment in a symbiotic, dynamically interaction form.
So indigenous cultures all over the world have done this, but without the technology. So what we're trying to do is harvest the best of indigenous understanding of how to build a culture, and then bringing 21st century, the apex of 21st century technology into it.
One of the ideas is to have a conference every year or so. We call it the Council of Elders, where we go around the world and we find people who are spiritually aware, but also have good ideas and philosophical ideas, put them together with all the social growth, the people working on the social stuff, the social contract, and all the information technology people as well, put them together into one conference.
Right. Yeah.
Feed them with as much food as they can stand, get them to have a good time, and get them to cross-fertilize ideas. And we do it every year.
Yep.
So get all the Aboriginal elders, not all of them, but like some of them from Australia.
Yeah.
The shaman from the Amazon jungle, the Native American elders.
And Malidoma Some and the people from
everyone I
Africa,
can lay my hands
and the
on.
Sami, and absolutely. And then the refi guys from Portugal, and the kind of blockchain socialists, and the people who are
everyone, that's what I'm saying. It's not we don't want to recreate their world, because we're in a different world. We want to learn from them to help us create this world.
Yeah, because we're moving forward. We cannot go back, and we're definitely not going back. This is a very high-tech image, but it is predicated on a different way of relating, and it's predicated on a different value system from the sound of things.
Yeah, it is. So, for example, agriculture. At the moment, we do industrial agriculture, and we're going to operate on a mandate where you're not allowed to use petrochemical fertilizers, and you're not allowed to use genetically modified organisms. So we're going to have around the table all the practitioners of permaculture, organic farming, regenerative agriculture, but also the best we can arrange for ecologists, and put with them open-minded practitioners of the existing agricultural science, horticulture. We can't throw out everything. And we say to them, these are the limitations. How can we have an exchange of ideas and develop an entirely new paradigm of agriculture going forward, where we have a genuinely sustainable relationship with the planet, and we can grow our own food and manage our own waste, and so on. So so hang on. So just moving to the next part. Okay, now we're getting
This is going to be a multi-hour. We're going to have to cut this in half somewhere along the line. But be
brutal as you like. So, all right, this is the Prometheus Institute. So, develop an innovation hub. This is every city has a reason to be. Obviously, there are problems with human society. And it says, all right, what are the problems? And so, well, we need to actually find a new way to live. And the new way to live is not obvious. There's lots of ideas we have, but how many of them work? And we've also got to change ourselves. We've got to change how we see ourselves, how we feel about each other and ourselves, and how we interact with each other and everything around us.
Yeah.
Right. So assemble all unorthodox ideas, and it's actually very simple. It's one relationship between us and everything else, and it comes down to how we see ourselves. Sounds complicated, but actually it isn't.
Okay.
Assemble all unorthodox ideas in one place, give complete access to orthodox methodologies, and allow them to cross-fertilize and nurture them going forward. Operate to a mandate to reinvent the industrial system. Develop a suitable system of high-density energy generation. Develop a system to source raw material commodities that are local. So I'm talking about like reinventing mining, reinventing manufacturing.
Okay, I want you to talk to Hugo Spars, really. Anyway, later.
Develop a manufacture value chain. These are the sort of people I sort of want to pull into this. A value chain that produces finished products from raw materials in one city.
Right.
Not for everything, but for a smaller number.
Yeah, keep the loops very tight.
Yeah. So if we were to run society on a smaller number of components and simplify everything down, and then manufacture those components locally, but source those raw materials locally. So I'm going to collapse the six continent just-in-time supply system into one
city.
For some things.
Yeah.
And then a small number of cities can then trade with each other.
Okay.
So so this is a series of ideas that I put together.
Wow.
I just rattle off like, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And in the center, you've got the management hub, but then you've got all these different ideas where each
Yeah.
department will facilitate a breakthrough in how we do things and then cross-fertilize.
Yeah.
At the heart of all of it, though, is an energy paradigm change. Now, I don't know if I was telling you, but I'm writing a book called The New Electric. When I wrote my big report, I came across all these unorthodox ideas, and management asked me to take them all out because they were a bridge too far. And yes, so they don't really add anything.
Management. See, this is what we've got to not have in this new city, is a layer of management who gets you to not do stuff.
Yeah, well, they were saying like, we're a geological survey and we're already well and truly over our skis on this one, and this is a little too crazy. Take a cold shower. And so, look, I'm a physicist and geologist at my core. And so I found all these crazy ideas, like Nikola Tesla. What was he doing? And if it did work, which I think I understand it now, well, how would society use it? Or what could we learn from it? It's probably a better question, because I now think that we should not do what Nikola Tesla was proposing.
Okay. Can you enlarge on that? Are you about to enlarge on that?
So when you have like a tuning fork, two tuning forks, and you tap one with a hammer, it vibrates.
And the other one
will sympathetically vibrate.
Yep.
Right. So Tesla had the idea that everything's harmonics and frequency. Everything.
Okay.
Right. And matter and energy were on the same spectrum, but from, like slightly out of phase. He had the idea that the Earth atmosphere had what was called a Schumann frequency, which is not different. And he was able to transmit electrical power. What he was doing was actually making generating power with hydroelectric generators at the Niagara Falls. Hydroelectricity, once you set it up, it's going forever, and there's no reason why it can't keep going. This was back in the 1890s when electricity wasn't really there yet. So much electricity was coming out. He said, look, this is more electricity than society will ever need.
Right. So because Jevons paradox hadn't been thought of then. Okay.
I would like to admit Tesla, but he strikes me as a remarkably naive genius. Right. Anyway, so he had this idea where he had with an aerial tower transmit electricity from New York out to Wycliffe in British Isles and back again with 98% efficiency.
Without using wires?
Without using wires.
And do you fry all the seagulls that fly between your...
That's the part where we should really think about.
Okay.
So the idea was, let's say you've got a ship and you're driving along in your ship. Instead of a fuel tank or a battery, you've got an aerial and you're downloading power and using it.
Whoa.
Right. It sounds interesting, but consider, if you will, Wi-Fi. You're transmitting energy of a sort through the air and you're using it.
Yes. And you can charge your batteries with your Wi-Fi, but the amount that you would require to power a ship would mean that if you licked your finger and pressed it against the mast, you would frazzle in a second.
So, well, there are ways of actually doing this with frequencies where you don't frazzle biological entities, but we're actually now looking at, and it comes down to bone density of mammals in particular. So we've got very serious problems at the moment where things like 5G, electronic smog, happens to be of a frequency that's very close to human mental health frequency.
Oh, good.
Right.
Aha, so that explains a lot then, doesn't it?
And there's a lot of things, for example, there's experiments where they're growing plants under a Wi-Fi router that's turned on versus turned off. And there's a massive difference.
Okay.
Wi-Fi is disrupting living things. This was one of the many vectors we were talking about earlier. So should we be putting industrial levels of energy into the air? The answer is no. Right.
Yeah.
But what it can do is it can tell us about what energy really is.
Okay.
And I believe that we've only partially understood what energy is. In our heads, the way we use energy, it's still burning stuff.
And spinning a turbine, which is incredibly inefficient.
Yeah. Right. But what we call magnetics, gravity, and electricity are interacting in ways we don't understand. When we first developed electricity in the 1830s, we didn't know what we were doing. We were still finding our way, but opinions were formed back then that we still use. What if we were to go back and repeat all those experiments with modern technology and modern insights?
Right.
And
let go of all our suppositions.
there you go. You are mentally fit to be in Prometheus.
Yeah. I'm
Right.
kind of interested in the 0 point because, guys, I'm looking at a slide and 0 point is on there. And I happened to share an agent with the guy who wrote the book, The Hunt for 0 Point.
Nick
So I
Cook.
spent quite a lot of time talking to him, and there was a particular question in his book, which was what happens when you inject the virus of fascism undiluted into the arterial system of the body politic of the USA.
Yep.
And so I used that as one of the kickstarters for treacherous spies. And of course, we're seeing that playing out in real time as we speak. But the concept of 0 point energy was basically that the gravitational field can be a source of infinite power.
We are sitting in a sea of energy.
Yeah.
At a quantum level. There are vast, vast amounts of energy, like at an atomic level.
Yeah, because you're on a planet that's spinning at a fairly fast rate, going around another body of energy. And if we could harness that in ways that aren't just solar, but they didn't find it according to his book. They had not got there.
No, there are several papers I found. It was called the Casimir effect that was proposed in the 50s mathematically, and it was proven in the 1980s. But what they do is you have two aluminium plates really close together, and as you pull them apart, you're harvesting 0 point energy. But it has to happen on a really small scale.
Right.
And machine technology in the 80s showed that 0 point energy did exist, but it was so weak it was useless. But the smaller you go, the more useful it is. But now that we've got 3D printing and nanotechnology,
Okay, right.
that to me changes the rules.
Right.
Also, you've got things like the White House released, the American White House released pictures of what they now call UAPs, or unidentified aerial phenomena, UFOs. And they basically said they are real, we just don't know what they are. And so I actually stood up in a presentation and said, look, I don't care who or what is actually flying this, whether it's a green midget with antennae or a Russian agent. What is the energy system and what's the propulsion system of what we're seeing if they are real? So all options are not on the table is the outcome of that. And, everyone laughed nervously. Sit down, please. So there's that. The other one that's interesting here is the electric universe theory developed by Wallace Thornhill. And they got the basic idea that electrostatics is the fundamental force of the universe, not gravity. Right. And so some of the insights from that, and they developed a medium temperature furnace, a plasma furnace of 25,000 degrees. And if that is correct, and if they're able to do it with relatively little energy based on their insights, then that is industrially very useful. Anyway, so the whole purpose of this is to assemble all these weird ideas of energy into one place. A lot of them are theoretical. A lot of them may not work, but studying them may teach us things.
Yeah.
Enough of them to me to the point where they work where, to me, there's something here. What that is, I don't know yet.
But they've got to be worth exploring. This is what you said the Chinese are doing. They throw 20 things at the wall and see which one of them sticks, and then keep repeating ad infinitum. The thing about what really is striking me about this is how are you going to fund it within a paradigm which is entirely extractive and which requires profit and where venture capital requires returns? Have you got a whale who doesn't require returns?
So there is actually a way to do this. There's two funding strategies on the ground. The first strategy will be we're going to launch in the next couple of weeks. So by the time this podcast comes out, I'm hoping we can actually say, there it is, here's a website, let's roll.
Okay.
The Venus Project now, for example, has things on their website showing that we're looking at this.
Okay.
The first stage is crowdsourcing. And what we're trying to do there is getting the starting seed. So a small group of people can leave their jobs without risk. Like I can't leave my job if I don't have something to go to. Right. And so there's a small number of people who will then go out, flights and accommodation to go out and talk to venture capitalist guys, the big fish. Now, the amount of money that we're hoping to raise is between 3 and 5 billion to build this city. It sounds like a lot, but as it turns out, it's chicken feed for the amount of money that's out
Just to
there.
someone like Musk, I mean, he
Yeah.
can blow that on a social media platform and destroy it, but he's not
So,
the kind of person that you want.
so the kind of person we want is what we call a legacy investor, who they know and understand that there's a very serious problem. They've got a lot of money, and they want their family name associated with developing the next generation of human civilization. There are
They're
such
also going to want their family to be part of it, aren't they? They're going to want
people.
protection for their family and their family's kids and their family's mother-in-laws, cousins, next door
It
neighbor.
depends on who we talk to. So whatever money comes
Okay.
in, what strings are attached to that.
Okay.
Now, there is revenue coming off this in terms of we want to actually, before we go to that, let's do a few other things first.
Simon, this is going to be a 6-hour podcast.
Sorry, not sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Whatever. If people don't want to, they don't have to. I'm fascinated.
Or you can actually split it up.
Yeah, we could.
So there's a
We probably
two-tier
will.
economic system. So first, we're going to look at the necessities of living in the society. This is everyone in the city, their accommodation, their food, medical assistance, education. All of that is actually just complementary of actually working at this. Right. So that's the first. The second one tier is a conventional monetary system in some form, where we're actually sort of looking at different. So people get two wages. It's like a tokenized. Is it blockchain? Is it some sort of cryptocurrency that's actually geared towards management of resources? This is the resource balanced economy that I propose, which is an evolution of the resource based economy that originally came out of the Venus Project. So everyone in the city, whether they're actually working on stuff or not, their needs are taken care of.
Okay.
On top of that, they've got a way of interacting with the rest of the world and accruing wealth. And if they want to go and spend money on stuff, they can.
So you've got a universal basic services and a universal basic income, and the currency of the universal basic income will be in some way coterminous with a fiat currency in the outer world.
Pretty much. So imagine if you actually get a job. In the beginning, we're a corporation and we're going to give people a job. Here's your job. As part of your job, you get, here's your house. You get transport's free. If you want to own a car, you can. But we're going to reinvent transport. We're going to get to that.
So you won't need a car; it'll be fine. Yep.
We'll see about that. But that's where we want to get to. But things like food, we'll be buying food in mass from the local city, and then we'll distribute like a supermarket where you get what you want. And then, but we're going to dynamically manage through dynamic equilibrium all resources at the supermarket level, what gets consumed and where, so we never get to the point where we hit with resource shortages. Right, and everyone actually understands what we're doing, and it's transparent, and everyone can audit the system about where exactly they are.
Okay.
But as part of that job, you also get a wage. Like at the moment, I've got a wage. I work for the Geological Survey of Finland. They pay me money once a month.
Yeah, and you can do what you want with it. If you want to blow it all on World of Warcraft, you can. If you want to buy a horse, you can buy a horse. Yeah.
Horses cost money. So anyway, so we have two tiers of and so what we're trying to do is change the nature of money and what money gets spent on. So what actually, how do we fund all this? So there's actually two streams. Do I actually have it? Yeah. Okay. Let me just load it. This is actually a big image. So we've got the city, but around the city on our train line is a constellation of industrial systems.
Whoa.
And at the center of it is a thorium molten salt reactor. Right. Now, each one of the, so we know we can't, if we just wanted a research hub, you've just got some offices.
Okay.
But that's not enough. People have ideas, but then you've got to turn the ideas into something. And that's the hard part. We're going to have a series of sites that will take those ideas and turn them into things. We're going to be taking industrial waste streams from all around us and turning them into, and processing them and turning them into products. I'm getting somewhere with this, as in I'm going somewhere with this. So here's an example. Come on, where is it? Here we go. So this is okay. A friend of mine called Alan Butcher is actually looking at getting an oxygen and water source on the moon from rocks for the European Space Agency. And he's one of the people I want to pull into the Prometheus Institute. What he's doing is he's bombarding rocks with microwaves like a domestic oven.
On the moon. Does that
Look,
not require an enormous amount of energy to get there and back?
no, this system runs on an energy system similar to a hairdryer.
Okay, but you've got to be on the moon to benefit from it.
No,
or you have to bring the stuff back.
I'm hoping to do this here.
Oh, okay. Okay, right.
I'm actually replacing mining.
Your old employers are going to love this. Okay.
Who? What?
Yeah,
so imagine, if you will, someone in the tea room puts a rock in the microwave to see what would happen.
To see, yeah, because you do, yeah.
As you do, and so what happens is the atomic rock structure breaks down, and molten globules of metals are produced as well as pure oxygen. So when you actually put a bit of aluminium foil into a microwave, you get sparks.
Yeah.
That's what we're harnessing. Right, sparks.
Wow. Wow.
And it's more energy than you put in. It's exothermic. So it's more energy comes out than what you put in.
No. We've just developed, this is a perpetual motion machine. That can't happen.
No, there's a weird relationship between sulfur in particular and microwaves. So you are putting energy in, but that energy is used very differently. So for example, when we do a blast, like in a mine site, and we've got explosives and we're blowing up rock, 98% of the energy is wasted.
Yep.
Right. Most of the energy is wasted, and only about 2% of the energy is used to break rock.
Okay.
And that's actually happening with most of our energy actions. What if we had a way of harnessing more than just 2% in an energy system? This is what seems to be happening here.
Okay.
And so I've yet to actually go and meet these guys and see for myself, but these are the pictures they've sent me. And my friend Alan tells me that he's written a paper. Like, there's the actual paper.
Okay.
And his name is Alan Butcher, so he's the last author.
On the European Lunar Symposium in June 23.
And that paper can be looked up by anyone. So anyway, so this is what happens, is they microwave the rock. Basalt, for example, each mineral is held together with oxygen. Okay. Take the oxygen away and you've got these metals looking for a place to go.
And presume they all come out mixed together. So you've got the iron and the aluminium and the titanium and the silicon.
Sort of. But they're all concentrated together in much.
And they'll fractionate, will they?
So instead of this is the research. They haven't looked at this side of things, but they don't care about the metals. They care about the oxygen. Right, I'm going to get my grubby little paws on this, and I'm going to do some serious research.
Oh, they're doing this to create oxygen so that people on the moon can breathe.
That's right. Oxygen and water from rocks.
Right.
They don't give a shit about the metals.
We want the metal.
Now, watch this for Game of Soldiers.
Oxygen.
We go to a useful industrial site, for example, a smelter that has a lot of waste. You get paid to take the waste away, especially the toxic stuff that's full of nasty metals. Thanks. Get paid to take it away. Put it into one of these things or a plasma torch. And so now you've got like concentrated blobs of metal. So instead of going to a mine site in the middle of nowhere, I'm going to go get a couple of rocks from down the road, from the road. And then you come out the other side. So you're actually making metal. Use a plasma furnace. And remember, we've got a thorium reactor backing this. So energy's the problem. Make feedstock out of that metal to make 3D printing of manufacture, which is additive manufacturing. And then you end up with saleable products.
Wow.
Now, because the way of 3D printing is, they can print anything. If you've got the feedstock, it's limited by the information you've got. So imagine, if you will, one shed. Rubbish goes in one end and saleable products comes out the other.
Yeah, and your AI is helping you to maximally design what you want out of your 3D printers. And then your only real big cost is transporting the waste stuff, which might be coming from halfway across the planet, but still.
It gets even funnier because there's a weird relationship between sulfur and these microwaves that accelerate this reaction. Now, sulfur happens to be in all mine tailings, and that's what's causing the acid mine drainage. And there's all these tailings in mine sites all over the place, and they don't know what to do with them.
Oh, they create sulfuric or sulfurous acid, and then that leaches out into the local water supply.
Yes, acid mine drainage. Take
Whoa.
that stuff away, put it in microwaves, the sulfur becomes an accelerant,
Oops.
right? And it actually burns stuff up, and you're left with metal globules. But the metal globules are things like iron, titanium, aluminium, silicon.
Oh, you can make your own solar panels. But are you not creating the sulfur must be going somewhere? It's becoming another sulfur oxide, so you're creating acid rain.
It's being burned up, and it's
Yeah.
been isotopically consumed and chemically transformed as something else.
Yeah, but that something else is likely to be H2SO4, isn't it?
I don't know the answer to that question yet, but my understanding is the waste plume off this thing are relatively harmless. So
Okay.
something's happening to that sulfur I don't understand yet.
Yep.
If that is the case where we are getting noxious gases coming off, it's the same thing as the ammonia treatment. Catch those gases and chemically transform it into something inert.
Okay. Yep. Yeah, there must be a use for sulfur somewhere.
Right. So back to
Okay.
the money side of things. There is a whole lot of things. So if we go back to our big map, which is, we've got a big city, well, sorry, we've got a city of 10,000 people with a research hub in the very center, and on a train line,
Yeah.
a constellation of industrial sites that are all optimized together to operate like an organic farm, where the
Right.
outputs of one operation are the
Yeah.
inputs to another operation.
Really actual, genuine circular economy.
Right,
Yes.
exactly. All the stuff that I've been looking at for years now,
Yep.
I'll take that, thanks. Right. But it's the principles of regenerative agriculture applied to heavy industry.
Yeah.
For the full
Okay.
value chain from raw materials all the way out to manufactured goods. And energy is the key to all of it. Now, this city has two money sources. One, you've got a 2,000 person strong innovation hub.
Hmm.
That innovation hub will be an IP commercialization hub. And the IP, I'm an inventor, right? And I've invented stuff, but there has to be a better relationship between the inventors and the people who do the commercializing.
Yes.
I'm King Bunny. I'm CEO of this operation, so we will
Okay.
do things differently. I want a situation where inventors want to come to my city and actually work with me on this stuff. So the inventors are there, and they actually get a fair and reasonable cut of the profit.
So it's not all going to be open source.
No, some of it is. So
Okay.
first of it is we get the money that actually will come in from selling. No, you open source some things.
Okay.
For example, how do you actually make fresh water out of seawater cheaply and easily?
Yeah.
So many people don't have drinking water. How do you have sanitation services? How do you grow food without fertilizer?
Yeah, and you can do all the social
Um,
stuff, like how do you make
yeah.
democratic decisions and how does it work to bring everybody together and what happens when you've got
And
conflicts in the lab?
that's actually the real information humanity
Yeah.
needs going forward. The money
Yeah.
system wants industrial stuff.
Okay.
So some things will be open sourced, some things will be kept confidential because of the nature of it,
Okay.
and some things will be sold. Now,
There will be so many spies in this system, Simon, that you're going to have everyone feeding back to somebody. Keeping things confidential is going to be hard, but anyway.
it depends on what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Okay.
There's a way to set the system up where that doesn't matter.
Okay.
You know, that's what I'm saying. If spies want to do stuff, they'll take stuff. That's fine. It's easier to do business with us than to try and take stuff from us
Okay. in
some form. This is where IP is actually, the value of it is actually you go off and do it rather than own the IP. Or something. So some IP will be commercialized. There'll be revenue. All of these industrial sites will be producing valuable stuff which can be sold. For example, you take the tires from mine sites, cut them up, shred them.
Big tires.
Yeah, it's a huge. Actually, let me show you that. That's actually in here. Here we go.
Oh my God, they are so huge. Okay,
So,
people who are listening to this, these are big tires.
So they're about 4 or 5 meters in diameter. And when they wear out on these big mining trucks, they just take them off and dump them. And they, again, don't know what to do with them. So it's part of the mining. And some of these things are so huge, you can see them from orbit.
Oh, great.
Now, a passenger car tire has 7 liters of oil in it. Or it used to. I don't know what the ratios are now. But there's a lot of oil. If we were to go and collect these end-of-life tires, cut them up at site and shred them, bring the shredded material back to where we're working and put them into what's called a pyrolysis plant, where
Mm.
we heat things up without oxygen.
Okay.
That rubber breaks down into a fuel oil.
Right.
So we get rubber products, carbon black, which we can then convert to graphene.
Oh, can you? Oh,
We've got a graphene manufacturing circuit.
good
Right,
God.
you steal scrap, but you get fuel oil, which is a diesel substitute. And so what you end up with is this.
Mm.
We want to build a city. We're going to need construction equipment, and that's going to run on diesel. And we're looking
Okay.
at a diesel shortage. And so we can actually sort of have a situation where the fuel source for anything diesel, based on a recycling idea, until we actually get things established.
Okay.
Right. And so, but what comes from that is a situation where we're making graphene products.
Mm.
So if we can make lots of graphene products, even though it's a relatively small site, they'll be highly valuable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
if someone wants to take the idea, and they do, I know you're going to go set this up and actually make this yourself, but hang on, we're still selling graphene products. And
Yeah.
the idea is to
Yes.
actually have new ideas coming on so fast
Yeah.
that
Yeah. Anyone with a brain is going to want to come here because this is the place where you can connect with other people, and you're not siloed in the way you are in academia, and you're not hobbled in the way that you are in commercial industry. You've got the
yeah,
chance to cross-fertilize with people who get it.
right. So this is the actual task here. So in the beginning, we're only going to have 10,000 people, and we're going to be a corporation where everyone's got a job to do. But eventually, we're going to become a conventional society, and it's going to be a city like any other. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to talk about before we hand over is the idea of transport. So this is the document that you've already seen. Now, this is actually a text version of this presentation I've been showing you, but what isn't in here is this idea. Actually, do I even have it? Bear with me for a second, because we've actually got to reinvent transport. At the do I have? Oh, I do have it. Okay, stop share. Share again.
I need to ask my wife to get the chickens in.
Okay, we can finish up if you like.
No. I just need to send a message asking her to shut the chickens up for the night.
So I actually talked to my wife, and actually everything's cool. So I did that. So when I was in Amsterdam, I saw a transport system where we had cars, bikeways, and a walking path where everyone had their own separate set of traffic lights. Bikes weren't just shoved up to one side.
Yep.
And underneath the train station, they had a bike park for 7,000 bicycles.
Yay. Yes, because
Right.
they're sensible. Yes.
So we build it in. So Jacques came up with this idea, of monorails. And back in the 70s, this was exotic, but now they exist. So a lot of his ideas were quite prescient. And anyone who goes to the Florida site can see Jacques' old workshop where he's got his old models out, and they are hardcore cool.
Yay.
So we've got like monorails, but we also need to move physical goods around the city.
Yep.
So we've got this idea of this is how they transport ore at mine sites on a conveyor belt. So it's like a shipping container that actually is on an underslung thing. And so what it means is you don't need train tracks.
Right.
This thing can be suspended. So come up with this idea where you have a two-way monorail on top of a structure, and you've got like a shipping container underneath.
Clever. Yep.
Right. And so next to it, you've got your conventional truck, your road system, but also a bikeway and a pedestrian path, and they're all interacting. But if you've got a situation where it's actually easier, because you don't have to park cars, to get on
a bike,
monorail and move people around, or have stuff moving between these industrial sites and shipping containers.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you have like Amazon has like a package management system, like where a package goes. You have a system like that, but you're managing stuff moving around the city. And so what I'm trying to do here is reinvent transport. We're no longer dependent on a car. A car is not necessarily the easiest way to get around if the infrastructure is built. So if we have like a network of these things, and there's going to be a lot of networks for the people that are there, there's going to be an industrial site that's going to generate a lot of money, and there's going to be a lot of money up front to build it.
Yep.
Build the infrastructure in. So this is the thing. Yeah. Anyway.
Wow, Simon, you just need to. You need Musk, basically, don't you? Or somebody that big to just go here, have it all.
There's a
Make it
lot
happen.
of money out there that's looking for a place to land because they knows there is a problem.
Okay. And nobody else is coming up with comprehensive solutions like this.
So there are people who are coming up with new ideas in innovation hubs, but each hub has a different purpose.
Yeah.
And this one I'm proposing is different to everyone else's.
It overarches everything. Yeah.
And so the plan is we will start small, and we will do things in a chain reaction. And because when we're going to an area where there's nothing, and so everything has to be built, which means what do we build if we make these thoughts? And here it is.
As long as there is actually nothing, and we're not just tipping off all the local indigenous people because they don't count. But are there areas of actual nothing there?
So the site we're looking at, the one I like, somewhere in South America, it's owned. We're talking to the owners. It's a massive patch of desert where there is nothing there. There's no water there. There's like it's 60
a few scorpions and some cacti, and that'll be it.
And the locals drive. There's freeways that go through it, and so there's a few places where the locals go to the beach, but there are no settlements there because there's nothing. So we're going to land with energy.
Yeah,
and if you've got
then
energy,
you can convert,
and then you can do stuff.
Yes, bring water in.
And so anyway, that's the plan.
We're going to have to stop because otherwise you and I could talk all day. This is amazing. Yeah. God, I wish I knew where that ping was coming from. This is extraordinary. Something is pinging at me. It's horrible. Yeah, and my brain has just turned to mush because I could ask so many questions about this. But Amy, we'll come back for another go. Okay. Assuming you haven't been assassinated and or kidnapped by one of the $1 trillion businesses that you're going to put out of business. But I'm just so impressed with your vision. Final question, 2024. We come back this time in 2025 and redo this. Is there anything concrete that you see on the horizon that you think we'll be able to go, yeah, that, I mean, AGI, ASI, another war, let's not go there. Anything technological or conceptual or political that you think by January 25 will be there?
I think two things will happen. One is thorium molten salt reactors are appearing in multiple places around the world. I think they're about to appear in several places at once conceptually,
right?
And which will set the stage for a few years from now that they'll start physically appearing. Second thing I believe will happen is ammonia as a fuel, internal combustion fuel, will make its play, and it will be similar to when hydrogen made its play 7 or 8 years ago.
Right.
First, people didn't understand it. Then it started to overrun electric
vehicles. And then all the businesses go, oh, the next big thing, we have to have it. Yeah. All right.
I do think what we call free trade and globalization will become harder and harder to deal with. And so we're going to see a more regional dependence on for doing stuff. But everyone's going to be talking about it's fine. We've just got to tighten our belts and hang on for it. It'll all come back. It'll be fine.
But no one's going to believe that anymore. So other than investing in the Venus project, which would obviously be a very sensible thing to do, ordinary people tighten their belts already, start growing things in their garden. What else?
So change your thinking. This is easier than it sounds, but change what you value. Where at the moment we're taught to value things. If we started valuing people and ideas instead, and we got to the point where, for Christmas, for example, if all Christmas presents were made by hand by the person giving them to them, Christmas becomes a very different thing.
Yeah. Or you offer an experience.
Yeah.
Rather than a thing. Let's just hand the kids yet another toy. Yes.
And so we've got to also learn discernment to understand the world around us. Don't be afraid of threatening ideas and dark ideas, because there comes a point when you understand them and you're no longer emotionally upset by them. And once you understand them intellectually, you understand what needs to happen.
Right.
And people, enlightened people, the ordinary person that is enlightened, starting to collaborate with others, is a force to be reckoned with.
Yep. Which
Right,
is
so
what the
we've got
podcast is about.
so we've got to start the process of doing this. So there are lots of things the average person can do. So if you try not to think in terms of fear like we're programmed to, but also see the person next to you ultimately is your solution, not your enemy or competitor.
Right. I think we should stop there, but that feels like a very good endpoint.
Okay.
Because we'll come back. We'll come and do something else. You're going to come on our cutting edge.
Okay. What's cutting edge?
We talked about this. We did discuss it. I think we have you down.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's a Sunday evening, and people get to ask you questions.
Yep. We can do that.
So people will have listened to this. You can come and talk about something else briefly, and then people can ask you questions, and then you can go away, and we will discuss amongst ourselves how everybody can integrate these into their lives, which will actually begin to get these ideas anchored and grounded in the world. Simon, this has been astonishing. As a way of starting the new year, it's just utterly fantastic. I'm so impressed with all you're doing. And I want to come and be part of your city.
Well, you're mentally fit to be there.
Physically? We'll see. All right, my lovely. I'm going to thank you and stop recording. That was grand.
Okay. See you next time.
Yay.